What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Season Gaming Bitcast, episode 292. I am your host, Ainsley Bowden, and it is going to be an interesting conversation today. We've got more layoffs in the industry to talk about. Obviously, that's the big topic this week, and we're going to talk about the impacts of the gaming industry, the specifics, what we think about certain things that are happening around the industry, and the impact that's going to have downstream, obviously, particularly relating to Xbox as well. I am here with two of the three. The third is coming. But, you know, the man, the myth, the seven is here. And you got a shirt that is cut just right for Mother's Day.
That's right. I think it worked out really well. Yeah. Happy Mother's Day to everybody.
Yes.
Yes. It's a great day to be alive.
Another good Sunday. Yeah. Another good Sunday, and it is Mother's Day as we record live. So if you're listening to us later or a mother in our audience, happy Mother's Day to you and your family. Hope everyone is well. And then we have this guy down here occupying the bottom slot all by yourself today.
That's right. It's lonely down here. And I think it's a metaphor for Mother's Day, really, down here, you know, the no family guy. I'm now here on my own.
Well, I was going to say that, you know, getting married in a couple months and, you know, this will be the last Mother's Day that you have without celebrating Dee as a mother. So it's good.
That's true. That's true. I can still celebrate her. You can celebrate anybody as a mother, really. You know, if you get creative. Some people call themselves dog mothers and be like, all right, I accept that. I accept that you give birth to a dog.
You guys don't have a dog. I'm trying to picture you with a dog. I think
do not like animals. No, thank you.
I thought he was more of a gerbil guy myself.
Not a gerbil guy either. No, they can just keep them outside. That's what outside is for. You know, it's for the animals, for the birds. So I use a colloquialism.
And the crabs.
And the crabs.
Yes. Dude, you got to keep those crabs. Crabs are sick, but I wouldn't want one as a pet. What do you feed a crab? What do you think crabs eat?
They eat fish.
Do they?
Yes.
They're scavengers, right? Like they.
Yeah, I thought they
eat like that. You know, they eat like the remnants of stuff that's on the seafloor, right?
They eat fish.
I'm trying to remember that episode of Planet Earth where there was that island with millions of crabs running around. What were they eating? They were running to. They were mating. Never mind, they were mating. I don't know what they eat. They got those weird mouths, dude.
Someone said chicken wings. I don't think
chicken wings. That doesn't sound right. I gotta say, that doesn't sound right to me.
Kelly C says algae. So there you go. That sounds more feasible than chicken wings by a little bit.
Algae. Yeah, that would have been my guess. I would have guessed that they like scrape goop off of rocks.
Vintage Willow with the best comment. Candy corn. Yeah. Because crabs are smart creatures. They're smart creatures.
They would eat that too.
That sounds like something that they would scrape off of a rock, much like algae. So I'm into that theory a lot.
They literally they walk into traps. Like literally, that's what they do. That's what they do in life. They're the dumbest.
They sideways walk. They crab walk.
They crab walk. Yeah.
Yeah. They walk into traps only to then get fought over. You know.
Yeah.
They really do. Yeah. I sent you guys a photo this week of the crab tank. I don't know why. I don't know why it was full. Usually it's like completely empty later in the day. But I walked by and I was like, "Oh, look at all these crabs!" But some days, if I go on a jog really early, they'll have the bucket out of the freshly caught crabs, and they're just out on the street crawling over each other, and they're snapping around. And it's if I see that, I'm definitely sending a pic to the Bitcast boys chat.
Bitcast boys. All right. Well, it should be a good show. Hogue will be here. He's just, he took Mrs. Hogue out to an early brunch this morning. So he said he would just be a little bit late, but we're going to go ahead and get started without him, obviously. As I said, we're going to be talking about a bunch of games this morning, and then we're going to get to the layoffs and some of the industry topics, like I said. Before we do that, actually, you know what? I'm going to save Tide's picks. We'll save Tide's picks for when Hogue is here. So let's bear with us on those. But we've got some super chats to get to right out of the gate. So let's start with those. In fact, we had one that came in so early last night that I can't even show it on the screen because it's not in the application in front of me. So shout out to Mr. Don Lionheart, a regular, who says, "Happy Mother's Day, cast. Visiting grandma for the day." Cool. good thing because I can only afford one super chat after blowing my budget on Cast Co-op, which he did. We did Cast Co-op. Me, Joe, and Luke did on Thursday, and Don was super chatting like crazy. So thank you very much, Don. Sorry I can't show it on the screen here for our video viewers, but there you go. Got Mr. Tao, good friend of the show.
Yeah, Tao in the house with a $10 super chat to kind of start us off this morning.
Oh wait, I put the wrong one up. Hold on,
you put the wrong one up there. Now you're gonna throw me off.
There you go. Start there.
What's up, Bitcasters? Happy Mother's Day to all the moms. Do you guys think that with the current situation Xbox that they would look at IPs not in use because I can't see it? Rest in peace, Banjo, Killer Instinct, etc. I'm assuming that's Killer Instinct.
Yes,
I think it gets. I think it gets increasingly unlikely that they take risks when even their safe bets don't seem to be working out. But I mean, maybe there's a chance that their safe bets not working out means, hey guys, let's throw out the rulebook and try something new. But that sounds like something a bold and small company would do, and not Microsoft. So my guess is you're probably right on the money there. Not
yeah. I think this is definitely one of the topics. Excuse me, one of the topics I want to cover with you guys is just the impact on creativity at the AAA level, right? And we've talked about that before. But with Microsoft, Embracer, these larger publishers that have these huge first-party studios now, where the investment is so large, and you have to recoup and become profitable. It definitely makes it tougher. What I would like to see in this space is Xbox figure out a way, if they can, obviously with such a large in-house development staff now, tens of thousands of people, to figure out a way to curate both. I know that's kind of having your cake and eating it too, but separate out the staff a little bit so you've got maybe 80-90% working on your big budget IPs, your well-known IPs, the live service games that have that recurring revenue. But then, allow the kind of 10-20%, what have you, of just playing around with this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? More unique things. The whole idea of Game Pass was that it was going to allow that, right? It was going to enable, kind of support the idea of a broader game catalog and creativity and some experimentation. So I don't know.
We can get into it.
Yeah,
later,
we'll talk more about it.
I think part of the reason that model doesn't seem to be working is because I don't think you can have a Game Pass be successful if it's only that, right? If it's only the hi-fi rushes. And it seems like the big titles that are supposed to carry Game Pass, like Starfield, kind of haven't worked out super well. And I think that's what Game Pass is missing. And I think that's why it's not really hitting, is you can't. It's like I know this because I look at traffic at IGN, right? And I know for a fact that we wouldn't have much traffic at all if we only focused on like small indie interesting games. I love covering those, but unfortunately the vast majority of our traffic is like the big stuff that people really, really care about. And it's unfortunate that is what it is, but I don't know if Game Pass is going to grow unless they nail that AAA delivery, which they don't have.
Yeah, so we'll definitely talk more about that shortly here. Tao followed up with the second one.
Bam. Another $10. This was early in the morning too.
This was before the show. Yeah,
like 6 a.m. Also, I didn't think Hades 2 could improve or change much from 1, but I was wrong. It has wrecked my sleep schedule. I still have Gungeon as my number 1, but it's fighting it, and it's early access. Indies for the win.
Yep. Yeah, Hades 2 is sick. It has stolen many hours of my life this week. Very much agree, Tao. Although Gungeon's worse than Hades. Come on. I love that game, but no.
So we'll talk about Hades 2 because I've been playing it as well. Not as much as I'd like to, but have been playing it. Gungeon I didn't really get into. I'm one of those where it didn't really kind of hit with me, but maybe I need to play it more. I don't know. So, Tal, thank you so much for the super chats. Appreciate the generosity to get us started here, my friend. Rick Davis with the member comment.
Rick Davis. Hey, guys. Now that I finally finished Rebirth, amazing game. Playing through both DLCs to Final Fantasy 16 right now. Really digging it. Did you like it, Hogue? I will say for Hogue, he did enjoy both of those DLCs. I remember
he told us.
Yes, he did. So, yes, Rebirth, not so much.
Yeah, in fact, he clearly stated he liked 16 better than Rebirth.
Oh, yeah. Yes, he does.
Yeah. So
there you go.
There you go. You're a lawyer this morning, Dan.
Yeah. Yeah, that's bad news.
Vintage. Good to see you this morning. Gifting 5 season gaming memberships. Hit some new people up on this SG side of the house with memberships. So thank you. Appreciate you, Willow. And Debbie W in the house.
Debbie with $10 super chat. Good morning, gamers. Happy Mother's Day, gamer moms. You're doing great. You've got this. Sending love to all. Heart emoji. Fantastic.
He threw in the emoji in there. I like it.
Who's got gamer moms? We know Hogue has a gamer dad.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know if he has a gamer mom? Do we know if Mrs. Hogue is a gamer? Ames, is your wife a gamer? Is Dan any gamers here?
Does playing multiple like slot machine casino games on an iPad count as a gamer? Then my mom at 70 plus years old is a gamer.
Sweet.
I can say the same for my mom, who's 82.
She also likes slot machine games or like Candy Crush and
slot
stuff?
Machine games. I take her to the casino every time she comes out.
Specifically slot machine. That is a very interesting quirk. Is that a Kansas thing? Kansas City?
Maybe.
No, my mom's never lived here.
Oh, where's your mom live?
California.
Oh, nice. I'm gonna hit her up.
Is she single?
Yeah, is she single? She looks like you, right? She looks like you.
Take her to the casino.
Yeah,
I look like my dad, but take her to the casino. Show her a good time.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate it. So,
oh man,
coin operated gals, dream come true.
Debbie, thank you for the super chat. All right. Let's get to some games. Tide said that Hogue super chatted, which I can't see on either of the channels live.
She said something about that there were 2 super chats from Hogue's channel. I think. No,
Hogue's channel they show up here unless they came through last night again. Like
I think they're not the same day. Something about Rob's not showing up. She was making sure that his channel showed up. I think that was. Yeah, we're fine. We're good. I think we got Debbie was one of them, and I think Rick Davis was the other one. Yeah, isn't that right? Those were both the Hogue's channel.
Were they? Okay, good. Yeah. I don't know. So. Debbie W comes in screaming.
Well, some people in the chat are gamer mons, gentlemen.
Noise.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm sure they are.
We didn't say they weren't.
Yeah. No, what are you talking about?
Calm down.
I'm just asking.
Why are you yelling at me?
What is happening?
My wife used to game, and now she gets like vertigo. Like the movement messes her up. Yeah, so she used to play Halo with us, like in multiplayer and everything. But she can't anymore. She gets sick within like a minute. So
yeah.
But all right, let's get to it. We're gonna save Tide's picks. I do have them. We're gonna save them. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about Hades 2. So Hades 2 launched in early access this week. Obviously, kind of one of the most notable releases of. Why are you making the face?
I was like, early access? Did it though?
That's what they said. I mean,
yeah, they call it early. I'm like, is it early access? That's
I mean, it's brilliant already. I'm still early. I am currently at the end of the 2nd level, the Rock Band boss, who I made it to on the first, like the start. Like I made it all the way to the Rock Band boss on the start, but then I did die there. I got back to the base, had some of the conversations with the characters. Obviously, it's very similar to Hades 1 in that vein. But I like the setup of the main protagonist. I like the setup of kind of the, where they're heading with the game. And I'm very, very excited to play more of it. I've just been tied up trying to get this other review done. And then got another review starting this week too. So just trying to find time to do it is tough. But it sounds like you've played it more than me.
I think so. Yeah. Dee and I dove super hard into this one because she's a huge fan of Hades. And this one is even more her speed. Female protagonist, witchy vibes. Dating sim stuff in it. So yeah, she was like, let's play every day for hours. So yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I also, my first run, I got to the third world boss, and then didn't get back there for quite a while.
Forever the one-upper, Dan. He's always the one-upper.
Well, I got really lucky, man. I got really lucky with my rolls. To be clear, I did not get back to that boss for hell long afterwards. But yeah, I got there my first run, and then the game. Somebody asked in chat if the complete game is in there. My guess is they're balancing and tuning stuff, and maybe doing some stuff at the end game once you beat like the final boss multiple times or whatever. Because the original Hades had a really long tail. I'm not really sure what's missing, to be honest. But yeah, you can like complete runs. Like the game seems like it's kind of done. And then also it's just like I've played enough early games to know what a finished game looks like. And this game it looks and feels done. I don't know what it is that they're still working on, but them calling it early access is pretty I mean, it's accurate. It is an early access game, but it just feels like not at all in line with like other early access games that are like truly still in development. Like you play Pal World and you're like, all right, yeah, this game's got a lot to like finish. You can't beat the story. There's, tons of technical issues. And I haven't seen that at all with Hades 2. It's like, it's such a polished game already. So kind of silly that they're calling it early access at this point, but technically true. But yeah, I'm really liking it, man. The art is amazing. Combat is great. Some really interesting build stuff going on. They improved in certain areas, like how the grinding loop works and switching weapons. And I've got some notes. I don't like that you have to choose a tool. Like you can't bring your fishing rod and your shovel at the same time. That seems weird to me. And maybe that changes. I don't know if you get the ability to bring more than one later on. But for now, it seems like you don't. But yeah, dude, what a great game. I'm really looking forward to playing more. And I'm like Ains, I'm busy with other reviews, so I haven't been able to put as much time as I would like, because I would like to put all of my time into it. But still, the hours and hours I have played are really, really good.
Yeah, it's excellent. And to your point, like it does not feel like an early access title. I think we've talked about quite a few early access titles lately. I know I reviewed Witchfire in early access, Manor Lords we were talking about in early access, right? Which literally has screens in it saying this is not built yet. It's coming, whereas Hades 2 just is incredible so far. Tal, by the way, says you will find out, Travis. So I guess there is something you haven't gotten to in that vein with the tools. That's what he just said.
Oh, really? Interesting. Cool. Yeah, yeah. It's always hard to know what a game's end game is going to look like, especially one like this. But I can tell there are limiters on it right now that I'm like, are these going to come off at some point? Because this is stupid. But yeah, they're like running into like a mine ore that you can mine with a pickaxe, but you brought like your fishing pole instead, and you're like, damn it, I can't grab this. Good. It doesn't feel good right now.
That happened early on in No Rest for the Wicked, because remember you had to slot your tools.
That's right. Yeah, that's
right. So real quick, Ty did send me the super chats, pictures of them, and no, I can't see them no matter what I do, Ty, on the on Hoag's side. But it's from Simo is the name. We've gotten multiple super chats from them in the past. So real quick, $5 super chat says, can't wait for the Bitcast hot takes akin to my hot take of Titanfall 2 versus Black Ops 3 on Thursday. Black Ops 3 did multiplayer better. So yeah, Simo is the name. Super chatted on Caskoff and said, hot take, Black Ops 3 multiplayer is better than Titanfall 2, to which we basically booed him off the stream. So
yeah, that's pretty crazy. I don't know about that. I mean, I know some people really like Call of Duty, and so I'm sure there are lots of people who share that take, but Titanfall 2 was pretty goated.
Yeah. Oh, but Titanfall 1 multiplayer is better than
really
2.
Good.
I'll put that out there.
I don't know. I struggle on that one. They feel very different. But
they do. Yeah. They do. I still like. I think so. 2 did progression better. You know what I mean? It had more systems at play, that type of thing. But the actual like in-game map design and kind of the craziness of it, I think 1 did better because it was more open, whereas 2 went the Call of Duty route with the whole 3. We've talked about this, the 3-lane approach. Yeah. Simo's name had a second super chat for $2 saying 3:12 a.m. super chats for the win. Hashtag time to walk to church 10+ miles. I don't know what that means, but that's what was said. So I hope you're not walking 10 miles to church, because that seems like a long way.
It's not that bad.
All right. So Hades 2, wanted to mention quickly Dungeons of Hinterberg. It's a game that we talked about in the developer direct with IGN that Xbox did. It was previewed there. I got access to the early build of that. Oh my God. Am I allowed to talk about that? I don't even know if I'm allowed to talk about it.
Yeah, you better not.
Oh,
oops.
I always knew,
I don't
would be AIDS.
It says honest journalism. You can't trust it. That's overcompensating.
No,
they're up to something.
I think I got access normally, meaning like, you know what I mean? Like through Steam, not in a publisher. You know what? We'll talk about that game later.
Good cover.
Yeah,
bro.
we're just going to leave that one aside for now. Moving on. We're
You know how to avoid that, Ains, in the future? Don't play new games. Right here.
I don't know, man. That seems like a pretty harsh overcorrection there.
Super easy. Not a problem.
That.
Yeah, being someone who covers games who doesn't play new games that's a tough conundrum you got there, my friend.
Listen, Dan straddles the line like a pro.
So Animal Well came out. I know we can't really talk about it because we were talking previous to the prior to us going live that this is the game that Dunkey kind of helped publish, I believe. I don't think he developed, but he kind of took a game that was in development and kind of helped kind of publish, like help co-fund it. And
he created a publishing label, and I think that means he's promoting and financing the publishing part of it. So it's very interesting. I have an interesting relationship with Dunkey, which is I don't know the guy, but I've been featured in several of his videos, usually either criticizing I don't know if he's criticizing games or game journalists or whatever, because some of his videos are a little opaque and silly. But the game is apparently really cool, and it seems like his team, whoever was working on that, did a really good job picking this game and curating it and supporting it. And there's just a lot of love around the process here. The review was done, I believe, by Rebecca Valentine, who really, really liked it, gave it a 9 out of 10. I've not played it yet, but I did buy it on the Switch per Reb's recommendation. So I'm looking forward to playing it. It looks really, really awesome and some indie fun. Love it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is the review scores across the board on this one are really high. And, it's funny because we're getting ready here in a little bit to talk about kind of AAA and publisher and kind of problematic aspects of the industry in that vein. But it feels like indies and the smaller space right now in gaming are just thriving. It just feels like, they're just doing extremely well right now. And I was actually going to ask you, Dan, I know we joke often about, you just don't dig those types of games typically. It is like a time right now where there are so many different kind of indie games that are, excellent, right? Being celebrated. You ever see yourself kind of opening up that interest at all? Giving them a shot? Did you play Hades 1?
Yes.
He didn't like it.
Didn't like it.
I hated it. Yeah. I'm not a big fan of anything. Really. I have a very narrow focus anymore because I just don't have the time, number one. And number two, hey ho, I just don't care for those kind of games. I mean, it's just, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like we go backwards a little bit, or the industry kind of takes a step back, and maybe that's what needs to be done. But yeah, I feel like I've played these games before in the 90s sometimes. And I really have no desire to, I want something. I'm more of the, give me the flashy Michael Bay kind of stupid stuff so I don't have to think about it because I've done enough thinking in my life and now I'm done. So this is full. It's going to take, something very special to move whatever's in here out to make room for this new thing. So I'm good.
I'm trying to figure out the game that got us to Dan saying games are too smart. And I have no guesses.
He had to fill up his brain committing the Cracker Barrel menu to memory, and that's really
as everyone should.
Yeah, it's taking up a lot of space.
I brought this back, and I'm very disappointed that I forgot to use it when Hogue wasn't here. I brought the gold frame back with the Cracker Barrel, and I forgot to use it. Damn.
Give me a kiss, Hogue. Oh, we kissed. That's too bad.
Did I tell you that my daughter loves Cracker Barrel? that she experienced it for the first time on a road trip this last couple months, and she loves it.
Nice. Which I guess is good because she has a bunch of swag for it, apparently. Because didn't we give you a Cracker Barrel swag pack at one point?
You did. Yes, I received that in the hospital.
So dude, she's gonna inherit this just giant vault of Cracker Barrel memorabilia. That's fantastic.
I don't think the pulmonary cardiac folks were too enthused about the Cracker Barrel gift cards, but I don't know.
That's fair.
They had to love the peg game, though. I mean, they had to do something for the motors.
That's the cognitive side of things. But yeah. So what game were you talking about? And hi, everybody. Thank you for letting me come in delayed.
Somehow we were talking about Animal Well, and that turned into Dan.
Well, no,
indictment on the industry. I don't know.
No, because I posed the question to him. I won't throw him completely under the bus, only under 2 tires. So I was posing to Dan. We were saying, Hogue, that we were talking about Hades 2, then Dungeons of No, we weren't talking about that. Animal Well. And then we were basically saying that indie games and kind of the smaller games are really thriving right now, right? And we're getting ready to have a conversation, obviously, in kind of the big publisher AAA space and layoffs and all that stuff, which feels counter to what's happening in the indie space, which is a lot of creativity and really well-polished kind of, developed games. And so I was just posing...
Balatro, Pal World, and Manor Lords are, to me, the story of the first half of the year.
Yeah, there's 3 more examples right there. So I was just posing to Dan, he traditionally doesn't really like the smaller games, the indie games, the non-blockbuster games. And I was saying, now's the perfect time if you were going to really kind of move out of that zone and then try some different things. But that's where you came in, and him saying he really likes the Michael Bay blockbusters and doesn't care about the smaller stuff.
And I am sure that Activision, under Microsoft or otherwise, will continue to deliver them for you. There's nothing stupider than a Call of Duty campaign.
That's true. 100%.
Look at Travis's face.
I mean, he's not wrong. They're pretty stupid.
No.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that as derogatorily. I mean, for that type of experience,
for that type of game.
That's what they are. So if we already talked about Animal Well, I did want to mention it. It obviously got rave reviews this past week. It is very much of the Fez Braid type indie spectrum. It's a very much a kind of chill puzzle exploration game. I have found it's a little bit too technically demanding for where my current agility is at. That doesn't mean it's everybody. But if you recently had a stroke, you might want to reconsider potentially getting this game. If you haven't, congratulations. But it does
write reviews for people who recently had a stroke.
Did you recently have a stroke review?
Honestly,
there's a market.
If you recently had a stroke and you're looking at games right now, who do you trust? There's not a whole lot. There's not really
corner the market.
Are there any people reviewing games who are old enough to have had a stroke? You know what I mean? Like they're all.
And then you can award the game if it meets your criteria, strokey.
Yeah, you can give him a strokey, right. And you can say as a stroke hero, and then you can look at the audience knowingly. And you can hold up your trophy, and then you can pause for 10 minutes for everyone in the chat to congratulate you for your congratulations, and then you can put the trophy down and resume the review. That's
can't even communicate how uncomfortable that would make me.
Yeah, I think. That's.
I think he understands that entirely, which is why he's suggesting it.
Yeah, I don't think you understand my motivations at all.
The Alex is in chat saying, "Oh yeah, those DPS checks at the end of the various Final Fantasy games that I was playing through earlier this year, not friendly to stroke recovery people."
Yeah, that's actually why they did that. Japanese.
I actually think the DPS checks are not friendly to the human race, but I don't run Square Enix, so
Japanese developers really specifically designed their games to be hard on people who just had strokes. It's a thing with them.
It's cultural.
Yeah, it's cultural.
They fight for their crabs and they try to get stroke survivors out.
You had stroke. No credits for you. No.
I did want to talk about Animal Well because I think it is an interesting game, and I don't want to rehash it if you guys have already discussed it entirely.
Yeah,
but it's got a cool kind of bioluminescent neon aesthetic. And it does have a puzzle orientation. I don't think there's combat in the game. At least I haven't experienced it. If there is,
there's not.
And so if you like those kind of puzzle indie games, really much like a Fez or a Braid or a Tunic, really all these one-word indie games, which of course was eschewed by having Animal and Well in the title for this game. This is a kind of thing that you will like. It does seem to reward in-depth play and focusing on details. If you notice like the colors of the eyes that light up in the background, that might help you at some point in the future. And I will say no more. That kind of thing. If you like that, Animal Well seems to be a very cool game. And obviously it was published by a reformed, continue to be YouTuber, which I think is a story on its own, which is to say that content creators and people that are enthusiasts for video games and other media are having some success breaking into creating that media on their own, which I think is cool. So, which is all to say, there's a lot of news stories this week about the trouble for the video game industry and the collapse of Suicide Squad and Warner Brothers and some various other things that I talked about on my channel. But I do think that, as you were leading into, Ains, that misses the forest for the trees to some extent, because there's clearly still an appetite for video game experiences out there that are being met in ways that are different from the kind of inertial publisher, huge dynamic AAA gaming space. And we're seeing that with games like Pale World and Manor Lord and hopefully Animal Well. I hope it does well. It seems to have a lot in it, even if I can't complete some of its jumping puzzles terribly easily.
Yeah, we kind of touch on most of that at a high level. So that's good. You kind of caught up all in one statement there, which is good.
Great.
Because we talked about Hades 2 a little bit, and just some early stuff. Obviously, Happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day, Mrs. Hogue.
Happy Mother's Day, honey. She deserves it. She works hard.
I did Hogue's notes for you.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I wonder how many you missed. What are your Hogue's notes for me?
We did all of them. I was just like,
yeah,
we did every game.
You should play
this
every game you haven't heard of. It's
wait, what is my voice?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. All right. Have you talked about my little kitty?
Yeah.
No, we're getting there. Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. Slow it down. Dan said, "Oh no."
I love playing with my little kitty, Dan.
Yeah, I don't like the way that sounded.
That was awesome. That might have been the best thing you've ever said. So we can end the show on that.
Clip that. Somebody clip that out of context.
Yeah, we need to clip that out. There's your soundbite for Hogue's notes.
I like playing with my little kitty, Dan.
Hogue, we were on nice track, nice even keel for the show. You've come in and you've just disrupted. We're off track. We're gone.
I'm telling you guys,
it's literally the name of the game, and it is fantastic.
He's the source of all the foulness on this.
If you have any desire to play with a little kitty, you should. That's what I'm saying.
In a big city.
Yes. Okay. Well, forget the segue. We'll carry on to this now. So, Jesus Christ. Little Kitty, Big City. Go.
Little Kitty, Big City is what Stray wanted to be, in that it's a good video game. I highly recommend it if you like cats, cities, or anything in between. It is a wonderful kind of environment exploration game that has more character in it than Stray. And I'm comparing it to Stray because it's the only two games I know in which you are actually a cat. It doesn't have that sci-fi element. Essentially, the entire story of the game is that you were resting peacefully as a cat in an apartment window and fell off of a Tokyo-style tower onto the street below, and now have to talk with animals like you're in a Don Bluth film from the 80s in order to figure out how to get enough energy to climb a tower back up to your original perch. But the animals are all kind of cartoony. They all have a lot of animation in them that really adds to their character. And the humans are all kind of amorphous blobs without detail. Stray, on the other hand, is a sci-fi game. This is not that, but I can recommend Little Kitty, Big City to anybody that sounds remotely interested in the premise. It delivers on that premise.
So
Dan.
Oh.
So Dan, I don't know that Dan would love Little Kitty, Big City. I haven't been asked to do any hits.
Listen, just keep talking. I'm blocking that part out because I cannot afford to have that information replaced in my small.
Well, obviously, Hogue is just trying to take down a great game. Stray, Game of the Year nominee, which we all agree with, and it should have won. It was robbed, really. I think we all agreed on that, right? Earlier.
How did that even happen? Seriously.
I don't know, dude. That was weird. That was real weird.
I would love to have loved Stray more, but thankfully Little Kitty, Big City exists, and it delivers on the promise that Stray unfortunately did not. It doesn't have robots. It doesn't have a sci-fi plot line about humanity or anything, but it does have you playing as a cat.
There are lots of games where you play as a cat, by the way. And I know this because my fiance is real into cats.
We need more games where you play as a crab. To be fair,
we do.
Do we?
Not enough.
Yeah.
There's not enough, as discussed last week. There's not enough.
So many crabs.
So now that Hoag's here, we can get to the Tide picks. We saved them, Hoag, as you weren't here. So it's a Happy Mother's Day Tide pick bonanza today, and I look ridiculous. Yeah, you definitely are. You're feeling some things out there, Travis, for sure.
I look like a Trader Joe's employee right now with that gauge. Probably got like a sleeve underneath that suit. It's a good situation for me.
I look like the cover of Payday. Like, why do I look like a Payday mask?
Dude, honestly, you could replace that Happy Mother's Day sign with like the numbers from like the arrest photo, your mugshot, and that would 100% be a mugshot right there.
Dan's got the soft eyes.
I have to say, I think the AI has got me.
I think they do, man.
Really do. I feel like I need to
we're laying in coffins, which is
it does. Yeah.
Although they're putting you in suits, dude. I've never seen you in a suit. They always why?
Well, if Tide is using one of my internet photos as a baseline to teach the AI, that is the suit that I'm wearing.
Yeah. That's right. That one photo of you in suit.
That's true. Yes, look. Suit.
Give me a kiss.
By the way, so Tide sent me some of the leftovers, and I had to call these out. So first of all, I need a headset that this.
Wow, dude.
That's wait, your headset is the back of your chair.
Yeah, did you notice that the headset is not on my head nor over my ear? That makes it.
I think it's over one ear. Maybe you're just saying like, "Hey, I'm playing video games, but I'll still lend you an ear, baby girl, mother." Also, it says Methopters Day over there, which I think is great.
Mop
Daughters Day. Hell yeah, dude. That's sick, dude.
Oh, man.
Mop daughter. Hell yeah.
It's a new Bitcast holiday here.
Dude.
Yep, that's right.
We should pick a day and make it Mop Daughters Day. And
the Urban Dictionary is going to define mop solder for us. Don't worry.
Yeah, it sure is.
That's great. I didn't even notice that initially, Travis. That's hilarious. And by the way, why can't I look like this? Which is like perfect anime hero.
I love that.
It says Happy Mother's Day.
You look like if
it's a grandmother's day.
It's very nice.
It's Happy Others Mother's Day.
Happy Others Mothers?
Yeah.
Happy Mother's Day. I mean grandmother.
That's great. Oh man.
It's a good look
thank
for
you as always. Yeah, no, I wish. Anyway, we talked about Hades 2, and because of Hades 2, I found this quite funny. So Evil Empire, who is making the Rogue Prince of Persia game, they came out this week and basically had some fun with it, and they posted this screenshot. I'll read it for our audio listeners, but basically they went ahead and just said, hey, look, little game called Hades 2 released. Everyone wants to play it, including us, so we're delaying our game. So they're delaying till later in May. They said they will give a precise release date tomorrow as we record this, so Monday. But I thought this was quite funny that they just had some fun with it and were completely honest and just said, hey, look, we didn't expect Hades 2 was going to be out, and we're not going to go up against it. So we'll see you here in a few weeks.
Yep, seems wise.
No doubt.
Never heard of this game either. So
yes, you did. We talked about it here, Dan. I mean, you might have been out that
talked
week,
about Prince of Persia. Did we
It
talk
is
about
Prince
this
of
one?
Persia.
Listen,
Yeah.
I'm completely zoned out like 70% of the time because I have no idea what you're talking about.
It shows.
It's Prince of Persia.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
It's basically, so there's Prince of Persia Lost Crown, which we talked about because I reviewed it, right? But then there's this one, which is a smaller indie title in the vein of Prince of Persia, basically using the IP, but it's like a small roguelike that a different developer is making.
Yeah, another game that's on top of my list to not play.
I think it always makes sense to get out of Dodge if there's somebody that's right in your genre, and especially if you weren't expecting it. We saw it, of course, with bigger games than this. We saw it last fall with Alone in the Dark fleeing the entire year because of Alan Wake 2's reception. And it didn't come out until like February of this year, I don't think. So I think it makes a lot of sense. I think certainly in 2024, it makes sense for even business messaging to be more honest about how these things are happening, because in the old days, and still from kind of bigger more institutionalized, inert entities like maybe an EA or something that you think of as just very bureaucratic, you'd still have a message that says, for reasons that make sense, probably for avoiding crunch and things like that, we're going to move our release date back out of this period that has an exact matching substitute. But I think people appreciate the honesty, and I like messages like that.
Yeah, agreed.
I think they just delayed it because they realized Persia's not a country anymore. And they're like,
oh, yeah?
That's a plot hole. We got to figure that out.
We got to gap it.
They wanted to make the game exactly relevant to the ongoing Gazan conflict. They wanted to change up some of the
Prince of Iran
background.
Yeah, it's gonna be a big trademark change. Totally.
I haven't played either of these games. I don't know if any of you have, but they've created some buzz this week. So I just wanted to mention them quick because I do want to get to them when I have time. Which is the first one is Indika, which is a small
Crazy
indie kind of. Yeah, basically supposed to be kind of a rather wild game. It's being joked about as being like if A24 made an indie game. That's what this would be. So it's gotten some pretty strong reviews and a lot of people talking about it. And then the other one is Crow Country, which is basically this isometric kind of almost looks like a PlayStation 1 era horror game type thing. But that's getting some buzz around it as well. So I don't know if any of you...
is cool. I can talk about Crow Country.
Yeah, go.
It is a PlayStation 1 aesthetic. It's not isometric in that it's got a locked camera. You can rotate it completely around. Cool. But it does have that look of a PlayStation 1 game. I really like its vibe. It does have some difficulty with its targeting because it is that PlayStation 1 kind of approach. So they didn't really give you quality of life adjustments for the last 40 years of design. And that's maybe a problem that's unique to me. And so far as I do have a little bit of trouble with my agility on the left stick. And because it is so kind of headshot oriented, like an old Resident Evil game, it can be a problem. But if you like the idea of a kind of Five Nights at Freddy's exploration of a haunted amusement park with a PlayStation 1 aesthetic, it is a good way to spend your $20 in my experience.
Nice. I'm looking for some good games to throw on the Steam Deck for the travels this summer. So, those
I can recommend a game I really like, but I don't think it would work for Steam Deck because it doesn't have a keyboard. I've been enjoying a game called Cryptmaster that came out this last week that is essentially a kind of dungeon romp, but with what I have to believe is an AI-voiced Cryptmaster. So when you type something in, he responds to what you typed in, so that when you get to a chest, you have to type the word chest to open that chest. And then you have to guess what your powers might be for your group of dungeon adventurers, like hit or stomp or what have you. And he'll comment on what it is that you try to type in order to figure out how to progress through this dungeon. And it's a combination of kind of humor and action dungeon gameplay that I think a lot of people on this panel would like, honestly. But it is weird. I don't think it would work on Steam Deck so well because of that typing element.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah. All right. Last thing I was going to mention was just kind of a cool thing, which I don't know if anyone saw this. It's definitely for the seasoned ones out there, but Nintendo's actually... What?
I was waiting for you to say marathon. I was jumping in. I was screwing up the entire show. Don't worry about me.
No, actually, I totally forgot about marathon, so we can mention that too. I was going to talk about the Nintendo World Championship NES edition that they're releasing in July, which, if you're not familiar, way back in the 80s when the NES was the big thing, they had a Nintendo World Championship. They made a movie with Fred Savage about it and everything.
Yeah, I think we all saw that kid go to California to try to fight dinosaurs or whatever he was doing.
Yeah, exactly. So they're actually releasing this, which it's pretty cool the way they've done it. So I think it's 13 little segments of games, basically. So it's 13 games, but they're set up in the way of where you would speed run them like they did for the tournament. And you can not only do it with friends, but they're going to have like online leaderboards and everything too, which I think is really, really cool. Because if you grew up in the NES era around that time, this was kind of one of those things that's always been out there and was cool, but you could never really engage with. In fact, the actual cartridges that were used for the World Championship still go up for sale, a rare once in a while on eBay, and they go for hundreds of thousands of dollars. They are worth like a ridiculous amount of money because there's only like 12 of them or something. There's like a handful in real life. So I think it's pretty cool that Nintendo's doing this. It's kind of an obvious, huge throwback to a long time ago. But, for this season, people like us, it's pretty neat.
Can I say that I absolutely love Nintendo at the end of their generations the last couple of times now, where they're trying to scrabble to the next whatever the Switch 2 is going to be. Like, if you remember at the end of the last generation, they had kind of a remix Mario and Donkey Kong levels and things that you could play through. And this reminds me of that as a product, which is to say they have all of this intellectual property. They have all this code. They resort it. They resell it to you. I think it's a great idea for Nintendo. And it's clear that it is that kind of bridge to getting to whenever the Switch 2 might come out. So I think it's a great idea. I hope that it is as well thought out as the previous remix games were. And I continue to love my Switch. So
it is impressive. They certainly know how to capitalize on their IP, which they do extremely well. Some people are asking in the chat what games exactly. I don't know if I've seen a list. It's 13 games.
Yeah, it's 13. But what you can see on the screenshots is Super Mario, Zelda, Metroid, and Donkey Kong. So it's like that level of games that they have total control over.
Yeah. And Kirby's on there. I think maybe Kid Icarus, but it's 150 challenges within the games. It says each week you can compete for the top spot in the World Championship on global leaderboards. You can compete with up to 7 friends in local 8-player party mode as well, which is pretty cool, man, especially for the families out there. So it's $30, comes out July 18th, and there's a deluxe set, which comes with like a fake gold cartridge, the old NES cartridge, and some other stuff for $60 if you want it. So pretty cool. Anyway, before we get into the large topic and get caught up on Super Chat, what else did you want to mention this week, game-wise?
Fallout 76.
Do it.
I saw your review go up, Mr. Tie Guy.
Thank you. Yeah. My review was a big undertaking. I played that game for a little over 120 hours, something like that. So I went real hard into it. And my review's up. I gave it a 7 out of 10, which is good, which is significantly higher than my previous review, which I think was a 4 out of 10.
I was really looking forward to a subheading that said a bit better Virginia or something, and I was disappointed.
I went with war sometimes changes as my review header. But yeah, I think that game is in a pretty good place. It certainly has some more work to do. Like for example, the expansions I kind of expected to be similar to like ESO in their like size and kind of what they're adding to the game, and they're very much not. They're kind of like small little content ads that are more just like a free kind of, hey, here's like a thing we put in. But they've been doing that a lot, and I think over the years the game's got significantly better. So definitely recommend anybody to hop into that who has that Fallout itch. But that's up there, and now I'm on to Disney Dreamlight Valley, playing other games.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's right. Solve that rift in time.
I already did. I played Disney Dreamlight in January because I thought we were going to re-review it back then. So I've kind of already played everything. So this review will probably be up pretty quick. But that game is still good. I don't know that it's gotten much better. It's kind of just like they've added a little bit more content here and there. But it is very much the same game I reviewed, which by the way, that I liked that game a lot. I gave it, I think, an 8 in my original review.
I like their battle passes.
Yeah, it's cool.
I know when we originally talked about that game, you guys were talking about kind of its potential, right, in the wide market because of all the IP, right, that Disney owns and what they could do. Is it fair to say it seems a little strange that they haven't kind of driven harder on it?
I don't think that we're the right people to say whether or not it's wildly successful, right? Those kinds of games are always going to go under the radar for like the IGNs and the GameSpots of the world. So I think that it's doing pretty well. Certainly there are indications that it's doing pretty well with the various places you can see it being sold and the people that are playing it. But I often think of this about things that aren't directly in kind of the core gaming community. There are a lot of successful things that don't get talked about very often, that live a perfectly reasonable life outside of the spotlight of social media or seasoned gaming or anywhere else.
I can tell you as somebody who has like a access to a lot of data on what people care about. We would not be reviewing Disney Dreamlight Valley a second time if there weren't still sustained interest in that game. People do care about this game. I believe it sold like, or it had over 1 million players like the first 10 days it came out. And I think that there's still interest in that game. Every time they announce like a new set of characters coming to the game, people click and care about that stuff because they're Disney characters, obviously. But yeah, we wouldn't be re-reviewing it. I can tell you that much. There is kind of interest in it for sure. I just think, to Hoag's point, we're maybe not the target audience. But I could tell you my fiance sure is. Oh man, every time I tell her I got to play more Disney Dreamlight, she's like, let's go, let's do it.
I think it's a really good implementation of that Animal Crossing home design kind of game. So I have no doubt that it is successful in the market that it's aimed at, which includes my daughters.
Nice.
Yeah, it's funny. I forget who I was telling the other day, but PUBG is kind of like in the circles I talk to, there's a couple people that play it and then other people don't even think about that game anymore, right? And yet, to Travis's point, when we would put up just the PUBG patch notes, just the list of notes, right? It would be our most viewed article on SG repeatedly, like every time. And all the traffic wasn't from the US. You know what I mean? It's from different countries worldwide, but because it is a very, very highly played game, just not necessarily within the core audience that we talk to around here.
Yeah.
Kind of funny. Yeah, that happens. So, all right.
I'm glad that you're doing that, Travis, because I think it deserves it. I think it is a quality implementation. When there are junky versions of that, right? The cozy game, I think a lot of people see as the game that we can make because it maybe doesn't take as many resources. You don't have to concentrate as much on AAA budgets and things like that. And so you can get junky design implementations. And I don't think Dreamlight Valley is that. So I'm glad to see it re-reviewed by a place like IGN, even if it's by Travis.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Let's get caught up on super chats. We got a few to go through here.
Pony up with a $10 super chat.
Pony up.
Pony up, baby. He's got a picture of a pony. It actually looks like a horse. I don't know. Who would have thought Xbox would be restructured around its own purchase? Instead of absorbing ABK, the opposite is happening. Xbox is no longer the trust fund beneficiary as MS invests in ABK instead.
Well, I don't know. We had some reporting that, a lot of people, former employees, at least a couple of them, are thinking of the changes more being like Microsoft Gaming, which I think if you look at their organization structurally, that seems closer to the truth in terms of like Xbox is now not its own separate entity, right? There's or as much as it was in the past, it's thought of as part of a core part of Microsoft. And maybe that has negative associations if you don't care for Microsoft or the way that they run business, or don't think that they should be the ones directly making decisions about games and that sort of thing. But I will say the idea of a company being restructured around the company it purchases is actually not that uncommon, especially when you buy a company that is bigger than your current arm of what you're doing in that, right? So ABK is like bigger than Xbox when they bought it. And so that makes sense. And, I work in startups, and it's pretty common for, startup gets acquired by like an old company because the startup does something that old company doesn't do as well. And the kind of idea of the purchase is we want your brain trust and we want your technology. We want to reorganize our product around the thing that you guys built. And so it's not uncommon, at least in my world as a San Franciscanite kind of guy. So not that surprising really. But it is an interesting choice.
I think this maybe goes a little too far in that suggestion. And Travis is not wrong at all. That sometimes the acquirer is seeking to youthify its business practices and purchases up the young upstart, but ABK is not that. Sure. And I don't think that Xbox is actually restructuring around its ABK purchase as much as it's when you ask for parent to spend $100 billion or so, then parent is going to start to ask what it's spending its money on a little bit more fulsomely, right? So one of the things that I said early on in this conversation was that Phil Spencer, one, in terms of the conversation he was having with his higher-ups in getting them to pony up the money for this purchase, but it was always going to be something that was betting his career on its success, and Microsoft was always going to have to figure out what it was going to do with this thing, ideally in advance of that purchase, but even without that ideal after the fact. Now, we've got financials at Xbox that suggest that if you were hoping for a big bump in hardware or Game Pass sales from just the purchases themselves, which I don't think anybody should have been, that didn't happen. And now you have essentially the Eye of Sauron taking notice of where its money went. So that's what you're looking at here with respect to Bethesda, which notably is not ABK, right? I think that's part of the conversation that people are missing, right? That they're combining the Bethesda acquisitions and the ABK acquisitions in a way that maybe isn't correct. That Bethesda is taking the hit from some of these things, primarily because they weren't the huge outright success that Microsoft wanted. And one of those reasons might well be, as we've discussed here, because Microsoft was taking such a soft hand on how Bethesda was operating, how any of these companies operate, right? They had success with Minecraft. They had success with some of their other acquisitions. And so they were letting Bethesda be independent, and Redfall and Hi-Fi Rush didn't have an immediate impact on the bottom line for Microsoft, which isn't really a surprise, certainly after Redfall's reception. But even on Hi-Fi Rush, it's not like Xbox had a big plan for it. They shadow dropped it, and it did fine. And critical acclaim doesn't equal sales or revenue for the parent company one way or the other. So I don't think any of this is really that surprising overall. But we can talk about that, I'm sure, more as we continue through our super chats and with whatever Ains has planned for us.
I think you touched on a lot there that's I would agree with. And the only thing I would add too that I think people are forgetting after this week is that the layoff count, if you want to go by numbers this week, was relatively minor in the grand scope of things. And let's not forget that when Activision ABK was finalized and came over and the merger kind of finalized earlier this year, that 1,900 people were let go as part of that, right? Earlier this year, which is a much larger count. Yeah, exactly. Which was a much larger count than what we saw this week. So anyway, but we will talk more about that. Pony Up, thank you. Hogue, I appreciate you adding Pony Up into your statement. Well played, sir. Yeah. Pony Up also has to say this.
Yeah, Fallout 76 went from West Virginia to Best Virginia. Very nice. Very nice.
I mean, there's a game called Virginia that might be the best Virginia.
Maybe.
That game sucked too.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a better Virginia than 76, but I will say I named my original review Worst Virginia, and I would say this is definitely not that. Much better Virginia at the very least.
Better Virginia. There you go.
Better
not
Virginia.
Best. Yeah. Thank you, Pony Up. Appreciate the super chats. Ceaseless Discharge just did a super sticker for the 179 rupees, but did comment, says kind of first time catch you guys live. Much love. So thank you.
Do you?
I'm happy to be alive.
Reference?
Do I get the reference?
Yeah,
no,
his username, Ceaseless Discharge. No. It's a Dark Souls 1 boss, the Ceaseless Discharge.
Oh, it is. You're right.
Yes. Which is a horrifying name for anything, much less the boss in Dark Souls.
The lava one, right?
The lava one that jumps up and you can kill it by like swatting its fingers and then it falls.
Yes.
Discharge is just one of those words, man. That just
it doesn't work. It doesn't work for everything.
That's good.
Anything, really.
Yeah. Well, moving on. Googleman is back.
Hey, Googleman's back with the €5. I made a gent song about going shopping for organic groceries with a pogo stick on Suno. I'll be able to virtually accept my Emmy. Thanks.
Well, given Travis is nodding, I got to assume that's a bunch of internet companies. What is that, Travis?
I have no idea what this means, Googleman.
I was nodding because I was feigning any understanding of what he was saying. I have no idea what any of that means.
Googleman, you've crossed the understanding threshold even for us.
Yeah. I've heard of gent before. I know that's like a music genre, but I don't know.
It's like metal, right?
Some kind of maybe like.
Is it? I've never heard of it.
I think it's
metal.
I don't know.
I have no idea.
I know nothing about music. Do not listen to me if I talk about music. Run away. It's like
I play too many adventure games. I'm looking at the capitalized words and like, all right, what's the code here?
Yeah, no idea.
DPSE. No, nothing. Suno is an AI company that's text to song. So I guess they take text, you type and make it into a song.
That's
like
hilarious.
Auto-tune the news. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
auto-tune the news.
Thank you.
That's good.
Yeah. All right.
It's hard to keep track of all the AI companies.
Yeah.
True. They're
100%.
here, man. You should see it.
Right.
It's crazy, man. They're
popping up everywhere. All right. Do we want to get into the bigger conversation here?
Let's do it.
The Nintendo Switch 2?
I love a bigger conversation.
Yeah. Well, we're going to touch on that right at the end, Dan, but that was
okay.
one of the funnier moments of the week, actually. So wanted to talk, obviously, about layoffs. Obviously, Xbox is kind of the focus this week, but, to set the context here, we talked about Take-Two layoffs last week. Obviously, so far this year, not even counting 2013, we've talked about all the ones from now Xbox, PlayStation in February, EA directly after PlayStation, Embracer, Riot Games, Ubisoft. So just to break down the specifics for anyone who has not been paying close attention to the gaming stuff this week, here's what happened earlier this week at Xbox. So they announced that some restructuring of their Bethesda arm, which is Arcane Austin, so the developers of Redfall and Prey, would close, but that the quote is just some, members of the studio would move to other teams. We don't know the count or the percentage. Yeah, Leon or other teams within Bethesda. All future Redfall development would be canceled, which means, of course, that the people who bought the expansion and the character pass would be compensated in some form. The actual quote in the announcement was "make good." So we'll see what that means. By the way, this was reported via IGN. They got an internal email that Matt Booty sent to the team that was then obviously verified before they posted it.
Yeah, from my view, IGN and Bloomberg hit almost simultaneous on this. So I think they both did good work.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll touch on that too. So Alpha Dog Games. So Alpha Dog Games was Bethesda's mobile developer who developed Mighty Doom, would close entirely. Probably the biggest buzz this week was around Tango. So Tango Gameworks, developers of Hi-Fi Rush, Tokyo Ghostwire, and Evil Within would close. Roundhouse Studios is being closed, but the developers are being moved over to ZeniMax Online Studios to support Elder Scrolls Online development.
Yeah, I can speak to this one a little bit. So for folks that don't know, my brother works at ZeniMax Online Studios in Wisconsin, where Roundhouse is. As far as I understand it, and this is not from him, I'm not breaking any NDAs, but I can piece certain things together from the years that we talk about these things. Roundhouse and ZeniMax Online in Wisconsin shared a space already. And so what appears to have happened is they essentially just broke down that wall, the corporate fiction between the entities, and brought them into what we know is a big ZeniMax Online Studios project of some kind. We know they've been hiring. I don't know any more from my brother and ZeniMax lawyers. If you come looking here, I don't know anything at all. And so it looks like they just kind of co-opted the one studio that was already in that space and said, you're part of ZeniMax Online now. So that makes all the sense in the world from a logistics perspective to me. The other ones, obviously, there were a lot of, well, heck, let's call them feels online about these things because they were at least mid-range names for the companies, right? People were describing them as if they were the biggest names in gaming. And I don't think that really is what happened. We didn't see Bethesda Game Studios close. We didn't see the real big names in that particular family of companies close. We saw the companies that most recently released games close. And I think that's what's lost in this conversation, right?
That's what Jason Schreier touched on.
Oh, did he?
All right. That's what he called
any
out.
of his stuff. I'm blocked 6 ways from Sunday by Jason Schreier.
As you should be.
Not just before you go on that point, Hogue. So he came out to your point directly after IGN, and he had spoken to some people internally, and it sounded the way he described it in speaking to the people internally was that they weren't closed out of because of Hi-Fi Rush or Redfall directly. It was more that they were only in the process of pitching their next games, which meant they were years away from actually producing something. And because they needed to basically cascade their leadership down, kind of tighten up their umbrella of management, that they were chosen as the people to go. That's it.
Yeah,
that's what he
certainly
said.
The initial reaction I had was though they have to be the furthest down the runway because they just released games. But that is not how a lot of people reported on it. And too many people, I think, looked at, Hi-Fi Rush got some Game Awards cred and that kind of thing, when I don't think we actually saw it moving any particular needles in any market other than that it wasn't a broken game and that people, especially the critical class, liked it. And so I don't think that's the right kind of take on what happened here. It really was that when you're looking at shrinking your position, your exposure to liability a little bit, one of the things you look at is who's closest to actually releasing a revenue generating product.
Sure. But I will say the messaging for Hi-Fi Rush was from Microsoft. Their own people were saying this was successful by every metric. It was successful by engagement.
A year and a half ago.
Yeah, exactly. I think their own messaging on what makes a successful game and what they were happy with that came from that studio is why people are confused. Now, I'm going
to say this very specifically, very strongly, and very directly. Microsoft is ass at messaging. They're bad.
Sure.
And so that was a bad choice back then. It's a bad choice in the messaging right now. And I'm sure we're going to talk about how they went out with public messaging on even these events this week badly.
We'll get there.
Sure. Yes, Microsoft is bad at messaging, but just because they're bad at messaging doesn't mean that they also didn't have bad messaging here that would result in people being obviously. I think people's reaction is normal and not really out of pocket. I think they're reacting to bad messaging from Microsoft that is now biting them in the butt, right? And so that's kind of on them. That's on Microsoft, not on the people responding.
I'm going to disagree a little bit, but again, I'm a corporate shell, so do with it what you will.
You are a corporate shill. We all know.
People get too emotionally invested in things like companies, right? The people that made those games are still alive, as far as we know. We don't believe any Microsoft hit squads have gone out and taken them off the earthly plane. So people are still going to make games. People are still going to make games that you like. And the fact that they aren't going to be organized under a liability shield umbrella called Tango GameWorks is really neither here nor there, right? Mikami had already left Tango. You already have various movement in the video game industry throughout all of this period. And so it's going to be okay, folks. You don't have to take all of these things emotionally. You can feel bad for the people affected. Of course, nobody wants to get laid off, but things are going to be all right.
I think that's what people were responding to. I think people were responding to the fact that there were a bunch of layoffs. And so, you got a little bit of pushback on your, what I would describe as pretty tone deaf response to layoffs that were a little more clinical than emotional. And I think when layoffs happen, people are looking for a more emotional reaction to the people affected by it, right? Not about the corporation. Because I'm with you, Hogue. We're bedfellows in the let's kill every corporation and start anew. I'm an agent of chaos in this regard.
Are we bedfellows on that, Travis?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a little more hardcore, but I don't care about corporations or companies failing. I think if a corporation is failing, it's failing for a reason, because there's a feedback loop on them not succeeding or whatever.
I agree that the video game industry, as well as certain media publications, have driven a certain emotional bonding to hardware manufacturers and plastic boxes, but I don't think we have to help them. And sitting here on a platform of some kind, I think we can say with a surety that people reacted too emotionally to news that really shouldn't have affected them that way.
Too emotional, obviously very subjective. I think it's people caring about the stuff that they care about in the games industry. And I think whether it was the reporting obviously is separate from opinion pieces and people tweeting about what they're feeling and that sort of stuff. But I mean, look, I'm never going to say oh yeah, big corporation, you should feel sorry for them, or you should bemoan them reaping what they sowed in terms of creative output. And you guys know how I feel about large companies and where they sit in the market vis-a-vis not being leaders at all. Creatively bankrupt, I think, is what I said last time we talked about this. I do think that the response I don't have a problem with, because it's just people who like games and like the properties that they worked on and care about the game developers presumably and their livelihood, and they're just reacting. There's nothing wrong with that. Can be separate.
There is something wrong with that, honestly. I think that kind of social relationship to corporations and video game brands is potentially problematic. But more importantly, on a kind of signal to noise ratio situation, I think it's crying wolf, right? This was not, you're reacting like Nintendo killed Zelda. You're reacting like big things happened, and Tango is a liked studio, but you probably didn't buy Evil Within or Evil Within 2. You might not have bought Hi-Fi Rush. And so there's a reason these things happen. And yeah, I think Microsoft deserves judgment for being bad leaders on this stuff. I think they've been scrambling for the last 5 years or so trying to figure out what
that's the
direction
issue,
they want to pick.
Right? It's not just this. I think people, like, systemically, there's something wrong going on over there. This is just another symptom of the problems that they've been having. And at some point,
change of direction.
And emotions or not, I'm not emotionally tied to any of these companies. I know what I have invested in Microsoft over the years and Xbox. I have thousands of games, right? And somebody like me, you get to a point where you're just like, oh, you know what? I'm done. It's not. I think it's just pouring over at this point for some people. Not me necessarily. I've been off that train for 5 years, but I understand why people are upset, and I think that's fair to be upset. Maybe not have that emotional response that Tango Gameworks is like some kind of Uber company or Uber developer, but at the same time, I think it's just piling on. And at some point, I'm not even sure that these people care about the actual people. Some of them might say that, but I think it's just more, they're just kind of done. It's just like, I don't know what they're doing now. Like, what the hell are they doing at this point?
Yeah, I think to your point, Dan, I think there's a difference between being emotional and being a consumer who is expressing your feedback to a company that you buy 100%. Products from or have bought products from in the past. And if your feedback is, we think this is bullshit, I think that's probably a healthy part of the consumer's role in the market of being like, look, we don't like this. We think we question your guys' management of your brand. We question our investment in the products that we bought from you guys and have, there's people who you don't have to care about Xbox's brand to care about Xbox succeeding, because if it fails, you're going to lose your entire digital library, presumably, that you've invested on Xbox. There is a relationship cost risk factor in investing in these platforms. And so I get that. I totally get that. I don't think it has to be emotional, Hogue. I think it can just be, we are giving our feedback and we think this is stupid. And that's totally fine. If you
are invested in a product and it's got a long life and you're worried about it not succeeding or what have you, the proper mechanism to express your dissatisfaction is to not invest in it anymore. But when you invest
100%.
Socially, emotionally into something, that's where you get these kind of crazed responses online or in my DMs or anywhere else, which is to say, that is emotionality. And I think it's fine to say, I'm not going to spend money on that ecosystem anymore and send that message to Satya Nadella or Phil Spencer, whoever you want to send it to that way. I think by the times you're calling people names and making, montage videos of various E3 press conferences to bring Xbox to heel, then you're probably going too far with your responses to what is essentially a fairly normal industry contraction.
Of course, there are people who went too far and got very emotional, but I don't think that you have the authority to tell people what is the appropriate way for them to express their response to bad corporate decisions. I think people have every right to say on social media and call them out and do whatever they want to do. Some people will go too far. Certainly, some people will turn it into a game or
don't blame anybody. Me or the executives or anyone else when they actually do something that is completely outside the pale and then the noise is the same and nobody can tell the difference.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's an overreaction can hurt. But I think this is, maybe it was the straw that broke the camel's back for some people. Maybe when something way worse happens, it'll feel worse. I think the context and degree is important, and to keep in mind that this is a blip of people who know what Xbox did this week, which is a minority of people, right? It's a very small group that actually.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the truth is a combination of all these things, right? I think there's different truths at play here. I think Hogue's right in the sense of, I think that a percentage of people in the gaming community do get too emotionally attached to brands and a specific platform and everything else. We've talked about that before. I also think that, to Travis, to your point, that it's correct that, because of what felt like a very meaningful game to some people, to Hogue's point, from what we have of the sales metrics, and I'll touch on that in a second, of Hi-Fi Rush, it didn't seem to really do fantastic, but the messaging wasn't that. The messaging was pretty clear that it was a successful game. And critically, we know it did very well. The one thing I think, well, hold on, let me finish my other point. But I also, I wrote this in the article I wrote about it, which is it feels weird to talk about some of these things sometimes, because I always sit in the middle, in the sense of like, I understand in terms of breaking the camel's back. I think that's fair, because what we've seen since last year is a large contraction in the gaming industry, right? And we're talking about anywhere, estimates are like 13 to 15,000 roles being cut from a wide range of publishers, right? Which is very substantial. But I think that this is just the last brick, right? This is just the latest, because we talked about Take-Two last week. You know what I mean? So I think that some people, what I wrote in my article is, I think that the message we got and the feeling, even if it's naive, to your point, Hogue, right, and shouldn't be felt in that way, I think the feeling was that Xbox, in bringing these larger group of developers together, were really going to curate a large publisher monetarily, while still retaining the small publisher feel in terms of game development and creativity and everything that goes along with supporting those smaller types of studios and games. And I think what's happened is there's a line there somewhere. And at the end of the day, reality will hit, to your point around, you spent $100 billion and you're under Microsoft. What do you think is going to happen? You know what I mean? There is a corporate reality that lives within spending $100 billion. And the reality is that Phil Spencer and his team and the group at Xbox or Microsoft, whatever the hell you want to call it in the future, is going to be responsible for optimizing profitability and the revenue generation to recoup that spend. And so those two things don't necessarily, they conflict with one another emotionally. Do you know what I mean? For the gamers that are invested here. And that's, I think that's like I said, I think there's a lot of truth here. The one thing I want to call out about Hi-Fi Rush, which I pointed out earlier this week, and I don't, in my opinion, I don't see enough people talking about it, is that it launched last year, obviously, on Xbox and did its thing, right? But when we got the business update back in March from Bond, Booty, and Spencer, right, they specifically called out the 4 games. That's not 4 games that they were going to publish on other platforms as an experiment, a test, to see how they would perform financially. Hi-Fi Rush being one of those games, which launched on PlayStation back in late March, right? The plan was to also launch that game on Switch, from what we all understand. So I think one of the confusing things, and again, I think the reality is it goes back to what we already said, which is they don't have another game in the pipeline for years yet. But it's kind of weird that we're now talking about Tango being closed and Hi-Fi Rush being X monetarily, when in reality, it didn't even finish its publishing run yet. So we don't know financially what it's going to end at if it does get still what it's doing on the PlayStation, and if it gets published on the Switch, what the actual end run of Hi-Fi Rush would have been from a success standpoint, which is kind of strange, don't you think?
Yep.
Yeah, we don't know it. I think it really is a play for the next product.
I think so.
It always is.
Far.
So
yeah.
I can give a little bit of context here, because I spend a lot of time in studios talking to developers, and I can tell you that the most uncertain time for the development studio is after they launch a game, not because they are worried about sales or not. Usually developers are just happy that the project's done and it's sort of out of their hands at that point, right? Unless it's a live service game or something they're going to be heavily patching. But if you have a publisher or you're looking for a publisher deal, if you're indie and you don't have like a standing publisher, then the most uncertainty is when you're pitching projects and you're trying to allocate resources and figuring out, do you need to keep everyone? If you worked on a AA game and then all of a sudden you're working on a full indie game, then what are the rest of your team members doing? Or do you have to lay people off? Or is your publisher not going to be interested in the next thing you're working on? Or if you're under a parent, which is the case of Tango and Austin, they have to justify being around, and they have to wonder what's going to happen to their studio and that sort of thing. So obviously, your solution is, if you're a small studio, is don't sell to a big corporation, because you know exactly how they're going to behave with these things, and they sort of have to at that level, unfortunately. But yeah, I think it makes sense. Like, I get why these studios closed, because everybody's looking at their past games and going, well, maybe Austin makes sense because of Redfall and nobody liked their game, but why is Hi-Fi Rush closing when it was a good game? We have no idea what they're working on next. We have no idea if their team had the support for it. We have no idea if it was out of their budget.
We don't have the full picture.
We just have we don't even know what the game was or if there was a game. And so I think it makes sense to me why these got chosen, but I get why people are upset in general. I get why they're upset with Xbox, especially in Microsoft leadership. I get why some people feel invested in the ecosystem, even if it's not emotional. You literally invest money in an ecosystem that affects you if something bad happens to it. So,
and all I'm saying
totally
is add to understanding rather than passionate yelling.
I think you are straw manning people's genuine reactions as yelling. I think there's certainly some of that, but I think there's a lot of people writing, thoughtful, considerate reactions to this that include some like, hey, I wish this didn't happen, and a little bit of empathy and a little bit of
it can be both.
Yeah, it could be both. It could be both. I think
I'd rather Tango existed.
You saw the worst.
I think that's where we're at loggerheads here. Is I would rather Tango existed, but to the extent that this is a company that recently made a smallish, somewhat critically successful game a year and a half ago that Microsoft said a year and a half ago was doing okay. I don't see that as the ultimate block for them not being laid off, right? So I look at this as Microsoft purchases Bethesda for, at the time, one of the biggest sales in gaming history. And Bethesda comes with a bunch of developers, some of which are going to fit in at Xbox and some of which are not. Phil Spencer, if we're going to be critical here, has always had an issue, I think, from my perspective, of wanting to both appear to be, and maybe if we're being generous, actually be everybody's best friend. And to some extent that works for a CEO, and to some extent it doesn't. So when you take a soft hand to Bethesda and you let them operate independently, if it doesn't go to plan and your bosses and their bosses are now looking at $100 billion spend, you start to have to take a stronger hand on these independent developers. And this is what that looks like. So if you didn't like the pipeline at Microsoft, if you didn't like what Microsoft was doing, they need to change course, and that has to look like something. And if you're going to complain about what they were doing and what they are doing and what they will do in the future, there's no win, and you're just an unhappy person.
Yeah, I think that's
fair. I think that is the role of the consumer, though, is to a certain extent whine about all of this stuff, because it's a feedback loop, right? It's better than no feedback.
Bad feedback is worse than no feedback.
I don't know that there's such a bad thing as bad feedback.
I think you guys are defining between bad feedback and critical feedback, which are two different things.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Critical feedback is great, but bad, ill thought out feedback of which you can never win should be ignored and binned like it's appropriate.
Yeah, and it's up to corporations to ignore that if they believe that it's wrong, but it's not up to consumers to not give it. This is the
same discussion we had a few weeks ago.
It's crazy.
I forget what we were even talking about at the time, but the same conversation. So let me ask this then. And damn it, I lost my train of thought, because we got to get to Bond's interview, which touches on some of this. But I was going to point out that I think it was one of the directors. I forget the quote. It might have been in Schreier's article. I'm sorry, I don't have it. But basically, one of the higher level executives that is responsible, obviously, for managing, the production of these studios, basically came out and said, like, they were crumbling under their own weight, right? They basically had a development kind of range, or oversight range, I guess is the better word, that was too vast. And there's no way they were going to be doing that. And that this contraction helps them kind of organize in a much more efficient way. So they were looking at it internally as a positive in terms of what they're going to be able to develop in the future, which I think is Hoag's point. Obviously not disregarding what has happened to, developers at Tango and Arcane and other places.
I think usually reorganizations happen for a reason. I don't think that this is 100% for a reorg, because if it was 100% for a reorg, they could have kept all of the people and moved them under different umbrellas, right? Existing umbrellas. So I think we are seeing a little bit of reorg and a little bit of benefit to Xbox, but we're also seeing more squeezing revenue where it doesn't need to be, out of a company that's already profitable, to appease board members that feels shitty, that is not necessary, and is based on people just, it's what we talked about last time this came up, right? It's more of that.
Well, and I think that's where, the conversation gets way more vast, which we could probably talk about for hours, which we're not going to. But, once you take it up the chain to the Microsoft corporate ladder and you think about their revenue and their profitability and everything else, right? It's like you start to, the questions start to be asked of how much is enough. Do you know what I mean? Like,
sure.
And we don't have that full inside picture of what is required, et cetera. But it does. I think that this is more of a perfect timing type thing, a perfect storm combination of what's going on in the gaming industry and all the other layoffs there, kind of, and what was expected out of Xbox post acquisition. Expected, I use in quotes, but also everything that's going on in other industries, right? And the kind of the tightness that people are feeling in general.
And Xbox's own messaging, I think, was the big linchpin here. It's like they just had their own disastrous messaging in direct contrast to what their actions are now. And I think that was a lot of the response was just that.
But I think we can help again explain how those things happen, right? You bring up the discussion, which I believe was from Matt Booty, about it meeting the Hi-Fi Rush, meeting the Xbox expectations. I think it's important to mention as a part of that story that we're talking about 18 months ago. And even in that 18 months, the video game industry and the entire economy have changed significantly. So what might have met expectations and metrics a year and a half ago doesn't have to meet expectations and metrics today. And yeah, that's bad messaging because Matt Booty shouldn't be out there saying one thing or the other about it. But I don't think we can just say, oh, well, then Xbox is going completely against what they said before. We can tell a full story about how these things work. And yeah, I'm happy to set some of this stuff at the feet of the powers that be, right? Phil Spencer does not get out of blame for the messaging on all of this stuff, right? So we can have that conversation. But I think there's more to be had as a story here than just, oh, they said this a year and a half ago, and so now they're going completely against what they used to say. That's not the case. Time matters, economics matters. All of this stuff comes into play when you're making these decisions. And these decisions, certainly from a corporate standpoint, make a lot of sense, as you suggest, Travis, right? They're two smaller companies of a bigger publisher. They just released games. And yeah, I think Xbox is getting the heck out of Japan, right? That's a part of the Tango calculation, certainly.
Which also goes against their messaging, by the way, about all
goes against Phil's "we want games everywhere" messaging, but that was always ridiculous, right? I think that.
But he said at the highest levels of Xbox, they've been talking about Japan for a long time, how much of an important market it is to them, how badly they want to get in there. When they acquired Bethesda, they touted like we have a Japanese developer. Like there was a lot of messaging, and again, time changes, stuff changes, but it's on Xbox to speak to that. Then, if things have changed, if Matt Booty's statement has changed, the messaging is still bad, and I think people can still be upset about that, even if there are other factors. That's on Xbox and their leadership team to explain their own decisions if they're going to be the type of company that talks about this sort of stuff, which we have them talking about it 18 months ago, and then now doing something that seems very different and no counter messaging to that. So
they can have bad messaging. I'm agreeing with you loudly, Travis, on that. Yeah. The messaging is bad, but then you take another base there and say, let's talk about the fact that Microsoft makes a lot of money. And as I say on my channel and here, Microsoft isn't a jobs program. Microsoft Gaming or Xbox isn't a jobs program. If Microsoft, with their $21 billion of profit, decided to make lemonade stands in America and they all lost money, they don't have to keep it open because the rest of the company is making a profit. You always have to be moving forward with your company, and saying Microsoft is huge and so they can't cut companies because they're huge is a ridiculous notion on its face.
Of course, and I would not argue that notion. I'm saying that I'm a very proud capitalist, right? That's part of my personality. But
too proud, in my opinion.
Yeah, some people say too proud. That's okay. You can think that. But I think that there is a larger conversation about the unsustainability of forever growth, right? Forever growth is something that if you've ever looked at a board of directors, they expect it. It's not healthy if it's not going up every quarter, every year, etc. And that's sort of unsustainable on an economic scale. And if you want to avoid monopolies, which I think are a good idea, because again, I like capitalism, and if you like capitalism, you should not like monopolies. And so there is a larger conversation about that, right? Is this even sustainable? Why is it always have to move up? And do you sometimes make bad decisions for your company and for your consumers in chasing profits? And is that a good idea? Right. And so there's a conversation to be had that has nothing to do. I'm not saying like, oh, they should keep these jobs because people matter and it's emotional. It's not emotional to me. To me, it is maybe just a bad idea philosophically, right? Like as a company, so I have other problems with it that have nothing to do with that. But yeah, of course, I'm not going to defend something that's not working remaining for some sentimental reason. That's not me for sure.
Okay, well then maybe I misheard your earlier argument, but because it certainly sounded like you were arguing that Microsoft was too big to make any of these choices.
I think they're too big to make good games.
I think. Come on now.
I mean, I you know where my tilt on this, which is I think when corporations get big, they start being bad. This is why I'm a startup guy. This is why I like indie games and small developers. And so, yeah, I think the best ideas come from the bottom, not from the top. So I view all these big corporations as has-beens, basically.
So, so let's jump to the Sarah Bond interview, just because this will kind of segue us into the broader conversation here, because there's some questions I wanted to ask around just the industry. You know, I think what we're seeing is just some of the results. To Hoag's point, time moves on, things change, and the industry is changing, and the people that engage with this industry are changing. Their preferences are changing, and we're seeing different things now. But before we get there, let's get to Sarah Bond's interview. So Sarah Bond goes on Bloomberg Tech with Dina Bass, and, you know, about 16, 17 minutes, answers a few kind of core questions. And to Dina's credit, you know, I don't know we never know what the restrictions on the interview are, right? So, but to her credit, she did ask directly about some of these core things. So I won't go through the whole interview. I summarized it on the site. You can check that out if you missed it. But here's kind of the core things. So she asked about Game Pass, because I think one of the big questions, rightfully so, that's risen up out of this is Game Pass. Because as we know, Game Pass, at least at the subscription level, has been pretty flat since last year, or maybe late 2022. So Sarah kind of doubles down on Game Pass and says that Game Pass is still the focus, essentially, that there's major games coming later this year into the service, some amazing, quote, amazing things. And Dina obviously asked the elephant in the room question, which is from Activision, alluding to the fact, are you launching Call of Duty in Game Pass? That is the biggest question out there right now about Game Pass. Is new Call of Duty going to launch in Game Pass day and date? Now, I don't know if Dina was maybe not allowed to ask about Call of Duty directly, so she said Activision, but Sarah basically responds, yes, across the whole slate, you're going to see some amazing things. So that's one thing that people are now running with the assumption that Call of Duty is going to launch in Game Pass. Personally, I don't know yet. We'll see. Two other things she really commented on, which I think are important to this conversation. Mobile Store, what I'm calling an MVP. If you don't know what MVP, I mean minimum viable product, is going to launch in July, and it's going to expand from there. So Xbox is trying seemingly to drive as fast as they can to get their own mobile store up, starting with Candy Crush and Minecraft, obviously. And it's apparently going to be very light in content in July. In fact, only like in-store purchases is what we're hearing. And they're then going to expand into that. They're starting with web instead of app for obvious reasons we've talked about before with the Apple Store and stuff like that. Yep. The other thing is she doubled down again on next-gen hardware. So she said, I said earlier in March that we're doing the technological leap with our next hardware. She doubled down on that again and basically said we're really trying to hone in, quote, on the needs of the players. So I think, again, you guys talk about messaging a lot, and I think rightfully so. I think part of the problem with Xbox has been messaging in numerous ways is probably a better word. So again, this interview was weird. It was a little awkward, if I'm being generous.
It was bad.
And yeah, bad. And some people ask me about it because, we talk here a lot. I obviously work in the corporate space and deal with a lot of this stuff, and I said, in my opinion, just my opinion, this was two things. This was Sarah being tested to see if she could, this was obviously probably
survive
both
a crisis.
But yeah, I mean, this is them looking at Sarah in a tough kind of conversation to say, how does she handle it? I don't think
in a pretty friendly environment. I mean, watching that interview, It was a fairly friendly couched interview.
It was, and it wasn't great. And then two, I think we go back to where they're trying to walk all the lines, and it felt like they're still doing that here. You know what I mean? It felt like they're still trying to say, we're still going to be that company to the fans. We're still going to do Game Pass 100%. We're still going to have next-gen hardware. And I don't know about you guys, but it's not that my confidence there is a little shaky in the sense of,
so is there.
I think, Yeah, I know. And I think it is a huge question, maybe I'm making it bigger than it is. But in my opinion, the answer to is Call of Duty going to launch in Game Pass is going to be very telling. Because I think if it does, then they are at least committed to Game Pass fully for the foreseeable future, maybe through another year cycle, what have you, to see what that looks like, and to get the analytics to see the impact Call of Duty and other big titles will have. And if it drives enough subscription gain to maintain their goal, their tenant. If it doesn't launch in Game Pass, then you have a whole nother ball of wax of questions, right?
I'm amazed that they don't already know the answer. There's been reporting
100%.
Credible
I think they know the
reporting
answer.
that they're debating this, which is crazy.
I think you have to have the conversation, but that doesn't mean that the entity doesn't have the answer. And I think to Ms. Bond's credit, for folks that don't know, right, you go out there as the face of a company in an interview like this that you know is going to be public. You are getting a list of talking points. You're getting a list of things that you can say about certain policies and what you can't say about certain policies. And you're keeping that all in your head when you go out there onto that stage. And that's been written not just by the business folks, it's also been written by the lawyers and a bunch of other things that you have to remember not to make promises on, even though as human beings, you like to expound on your answers pretty regularly. So one of the things that's happening in that interview is I don't know Ms. Bond from Adam. I have never met her. I know that Ains, I think that you have at least been in the room.
I have met her, yes.
Spencer and
Super
Bond
nice. Super nice.
And she might be the nicest person in the world. She was ill prepared for this specific task. Right? Agreed. Answering questions while keeping 100 things in your head. She wound up looking like a computer that was slightly frying in a Star Trek episode while it happened. And I felt bad for her. But it didn't work out the way Microsoft wanted.
I don't think they should have done this interview at all. I think
me neither. But you think it was pre-planned? Like they couldn't get away from it?
I think they knew that the layoffs were going to happen, and that if they didn't, then that is just another mistake because they control when the layoffs happen or when they announce them.
Of course,
of course. So I think that this interview should not have happened. I think she came off as terribly robotic and like stilted. Like she was reading off of a script. She was still on book, I guess.
Well, the answer to the Tango closing was most representative of that, right? She basically said nothing. She said nothing.
It was weird, dude. And the Hi-Fi Rush thing, she just completely dodged the question about but the game was good. What's up with that? She was probably instructed to dodge that question, but still, you just don't do that interview. The Game Pass thing really troubles me, getting back to that, just because that's the thing we keep saying that Game Pass is missing. And I think the reason that it's not driving the subscription is stagnating is it's missing the big tent poles. And every time we think we're going to get a big tent pole like Starfield, it ends up being, good, not great. And, Call of Duty is one way to ensure that either you're going to get a whole bunch of sales because people are just going to buy the game and not subscribe to Game Pass, or you're going to get a whole bunch of new subscribers. And that's what you need to do if you want growth. And so it's very odd that we don't know as consumers if that's happening yet. I feel like it should just be a no-brainer to just say, if we're publishing it, it's on Game Pass. Now subscribe to Game Pass, right? And you'll never have to think about this stuff ever again. You'll just get all.
I'm pretty willing to guarantee that Call of Duty will be on Game Pass, but I have no doubt that they're fighting over it. I suspect the end point of this is Call of Duty's on Game Pass, but only on Ultimate, or even a new tier that's just Call of Duty Activision or whatever. But I think that's what's going to happen. I think they need to run something that big on Game Pass in order to make sure that everybody in gaming knows that Game Pass exists.
Yep.
So I think that is what's going to happen at the end of the day. But the fight is happening because there wasn't a bounce from anything that they did over the last year.
Yes. And I think I agree with both of you. I think in my article, I predicted, I said, I'm not super confident, but I do believe, we're getting the conference in less than a month now. We're to get the showcase in June. And we know that we have the Call of Duty Direct post showcase like they did Starfield last year. My guess is that they announce it's launching in Game Pass at that piece. They end basically saying that this launches in Game Pass. And I think you're right that between Game Pass and then there are other games we know they're coming this year, assuming release dates hold, always that asterisk, right? But Indiana Jones, Avowed, some of these other games we've talked about in the past, and they will look obviously at that data to see, did we move the needle, right?
That's what they're analyzing.
But I think they will get it to Game Pass.
I think it will, but what's the barometer, right? Like say it goes up 5 million, but they expected 10. What do you do then?
Well, I think the question is do you want money now by not putting on Game Pass and selling it because people will buy it? It's Call of Duty. Or do you want money in the long term by investing in this? Because I feel a little bit of the issue with Game Pass subscription is the trust has not been built yet with like, I'm an Xbox Game Pass subscriber and I know that all the games are going to come to Game Pass that are on Xbox. If you knew that, it would change your calculus a bit. But like if I were a Game Pass subscriber right now, which I am, and I loved Call of Duty and I saw this news blurb that they're not sure if it's going to be in Game Pass, I would feel pretty betrayed. That might be an unsubscribe for me, right? It's like, wait, I thought the whole point was I could play all your games on Game Pass without buying them. Why are you even talking about some games not being on it, right? Why, like it should be, if you want to inspire confidence in the consumer, it should just be taken for granted.
Be a known. Yes.
Because Netflix is never going like, hey, we have a show and this one's not going to be on our streaming platform. We're selling it separately. It's just a crazy way to run your subscription business, I think.
But they do. The streamers do that, right? Disney made a show, pulled it right off at Disney Plus. You can't find it anywhere. Max made shows and movies. They pulled them right off their service. Can't find them anywhere. So the trust level of streamers is already reduced. It's not a solely Microsoft problem.
That's correct, but they're not never putting those shows on their streaming platforms and selling them separately as a separate service. And that's what they're kind of talking about here, right? And I feel like when you have such a new subscription, building that trust and consumer confidence is kind of important. And I don't think Xbox has it yet. And they're kind of self-inflicted wounds, right? It's a messaging problem yet again.
I was to that point. One of the things I pointed out this week, people may have forgotten, is that last year's showcase, which everyone enjoyed, by the way, the showcase was very well regarded. After that showcase, they did the press only event, which was Booty, Spencer, Bond, and Tim. Tim. There's some who call him Tim. Todd Howard. And, they were talking about that. And part of the conversation there that I really latched onto, right, I think for obvious reasons, was Booty's comments at the time. And I was sitting there in the audience talking about MAU, right, monthly active users, and how their entire goal, and Dan, we've talked about this for what seems like since Bitcast started at this point.
I hate that metric, by the way. I think it's
MAU. Yeah. That's how they measure it. But where I was going is that a game a quarter. Booty reiterated that starting with Hellblade 2, which I will remind you, releases in 9 days. Starting with Hellblade 2, Xbox will publish a first-party game every quarter in Game Pass. And I think that if they're going to commit to Game Pass, because it has, to Travis's point, it can't be Game Pass and sales. Are you committing to Game Pass or are you committing to sales? Can't be both. If you're going to go all in with Game Pass, you have to do it. And I think that if Game Pass is the focus, and at least still now, you have to put Call of Duty, you have to get every game, you have to see what the tentpole titles do for you. And then we'll be revisiting this conversation next year if they don't hit their metrics, I suppose.
I really don't have any doubt that it's going in this year. I mean, that redacted slot is Call of Duty. We've talked about that. It is
Call of Duty.
I think
and I think you can read the structure of their shows in the summer now as the game they think is going to be the biggest impact on Game Pass gets its own spotlight show.
Yes.
If I were them, though, I wouldn't leave it up to interpretation. I think that they should just come out strong and be like, yes, if you're a Game Pass subscriber, all of our stuff is going to be coming to that. So subscribe to Game Pass.
But Activision still has contracts with Sony that Xbox is allowing to survive the transaction. So we don't know what Xbox is allowed to say or not say about Call of Duty in particular on these.
I thought, I'm sorry, maybe I'm wrong, and I probably am, but I thought those ended with the entry in 2023.
I think their exclusivity ended, right?
They end with 2024's entry, but even then, we don't know what they can and can't say because it doesn't have to attach to just those products.
Yeah, fair.
I tend to agree. If only they would market the games coming to their platform, that'd be cool.
I think Microsoft is fully aware that Hellblade isn't going to move any needles at all.
I don't think so. So a little bit of insider. I have personal relationships with people working Xbox marketing, and according to them, that department is just gutted as heck. They're getting layoff like crazy because marketing and HR tend to be the first at the door when people tighten their belts, and apparently they just have like no budget. Like it's like tough over there.
Well, and apologies to your friends, but one of the things we're talking about is that Xbox is bad at messaging. Arguably, that's the marketing department's purview.
Yes. Yep, it sure is. And this person complains about it a lot. So I think even internally there is frustration on like what their team does and what their team is given in terms of resources and yada yada. But this is the maddest I've ever seen him, because it's like, unforced errors all around. And I think Hellblade 2 could move the needle. I think if you put marketing budget into it and you came out hard and said, hey, even if you didn't play the first game, I mean, look at Borderlands 2 compared to Borderlands 1. No one knew. It was a very niche game. Borderlands 2, they just marketed the crap out of it and ended up being a great game. Lots of people played it. That's how you expand your audience. So I think they could do it. From what I know of that organization, I just think they're not positioned to do it right now. And I think there's a lot of frustration internally on that team about their inability to do that.
That's entirely fair.
Yeah. That's fair.
Now with Borderlands 1, I would say that I believe that was on magazine covers. So it might be niche in certain respects, but not niche overall.
Yeah, they certainly tried with both games, but I think you have breakout games, and I don't think you have. I don't think you usually have a breakout game if you don't go for it. Like you have to swing for the fences when it comes to marketing. So
let me ask. I think we have a anecdotal example here on the panel. Mr. Rodriguez, if I remember, you stopped subscribing to Game Pass last year.
No, it's been like 3 years. I haven't had it.
Never mind, 3 years. So if they come out and Call of Duty, Indiana Jones, Avowed, all that other stuff, are you more interested?
Yes, but I'm not going to do it until I get some actual concrete information. Here's my issue with that company is that I'm not sure what everybody saw, like, 10 years ago, when, Phil Spencer took over. A lot of it is just talk, and people just fall into this thing. Show me results. I'm the end consumer. That's all I am. I don't care about your numbers. I don't care about your studios. And no offense, I don't care about the devs that get laid off because, I've been there. I can empathize with you guys. But, this happens in every business, right? Fine. All right. Just show me the results. And that's what we weren't getting. And 3 years ago, I was like, well, what am I still subbing to this for? And that was kind of like the end of the initial Game Pass, where you got like all that stuff transferring over, you got really good deals. And, this became a year. And, so I was pretty invested in it just because I already had all my money into it. So I really didn't have to reinvest. But when it came that time, I did it for a couple months, and then I was like, you know what? I mean, I don't play a ton anyway, so I can just buy these games. Excuse me. Call of Duty is not going to move the needle for me. But Indiana Jones sounds interesting. Avowed sounds interesting, but I still don't have any clue how they're going to play out, right? And
sure, you'll wait until that moment exists where it's on the service and you want to play it. Yes,
right. I
think there's a lot of Dan's out there just waiting. For the
that's why I'm asking.
Shit. Yeah,
that's why I'm asking. Yeah,
I just haven't been. And it's nothing against Xbox because, like I said, I didn't even own a PS3 to be honest with you. I just completely skipped that because the Xbox 360 gave me so much, without the subs. God, I loved it. It was one of the most amazing consoles. I mean,
except for the fact that I had to send it in the mail back to be replaced 6 times.
Hey, we don't talk about those times.
We did. I did too. Don't we? That is true. But generally, I mean, it was just I had what I needed. When the Xbox One came out, everything was backwards compatible. I could just keep going. It was fine. I had built this digital library, or the very beginnings of it anyway. But now I've been watching this for, been doing this for years, Ains, and it's just, I've never had that consumer confidence in Xbox as much as maybe Nintendo for sure, Sony to a certain extent, because, it's just, that's the games I played, and if Xbox came out with some stuff that, I love State of Decay 2, I was Pirate Legend and Sea of Thieves, but I bought those games. So
you were one of the first Pirate Legends to Sea of Thieves. Like he was Pirate Legend in OG Sea of Thieves.
I was OG,
crazy, dude.
Like
that was a hard grind. That was
dude. He wrote a full article on it about how much time he spent to do it.
It was fantastic.
And I'm the anti-Dan on this, which is to say, I would be buying AAA games anyway, so they don't really move me in Game Pass that much.
They don't.
Where I see a fall off in Game Pass is that they were for a time the house of any decent indie that you maybe didn't want to spend money on, but you were hearing good things about. Like every month, there were just the top 4 items were indies that I wanted to play. And like now, where in the heck is Animal Well? Where is Little Kitty Big City? Where are these games in Game Pass? They aren't making
Little Kitty Big City is in Game Pass.
Is it?
Yep.
Yes.
And by the way, so is Another Crab's Treasure, and they got Have a Nice Death. I think Animal Well is more of a problem.
Pal World.
Yeah, Pal World. Animal Well is not on Xbox, so that's kind of a separate but related problem with like they just can't get games on their platform.
Well, I apologize for being mad about there not being any Little Kitty on your system, Xbox. Good for showing me wrong.
I think they have kept the indie pretty well fed, because I find stuff on there that I haven't heard of or wasn't sure if I was going to get like pretty regularly.
Have a Nice Death is really cool.
Yeah, it is. I just don't think that gets you from 30 million to 110 million or whatever they said it is. I don't think that the market for people who are like Hogue and me, who just like to discover new weird games, is particularly big. I think that becomes a part of it once you get your tentpole game pipeline solid. Then people discover it, and then maybe we convince Dan's to be more like Hogue's and Travis's down the line.
I used to be like Hogue's and Travis's.
Yeah, and maybe you will be. Maybe you will be again when you don't have to buy any of your.
Everything got.
He's just been so hurt by Oxenfree. He's worried about running into one in a dark alley.
He's afraid to love again, right, Hogue?
Yeah,
that's what happened. No, I mean, here's the thing. You know, traditionally, when Game Pass launched, and somebody says something about Game Pass hate in the chat. I'm not hating on Game Pass. I think it's a great service for people who will utilize it. And
yeah, I love it.
It's good for some devs that, you know, for that discoverability factor. I just think watching Xbox change, I mean, it's like they're throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. And they have to do that because they can't compete traditionally with Nintendo or PlayStation. They haven't. I mean, maybe they can.
Sony might not ever release a game again. We don't know.
I mean, I'm just saying they haven't. They weren't able to compete, so
they just do music now.
What did they do though? Honestly, like they
no. I'm laughing at Hogue's comment because that's a whole separate conversation.
It's just gonna be Ghostbusters reboots.
Anyway, continue, please. Sorry.
No, you're fine. So I mean, it was Game Pass, and I was like, hey, this sounds like a good deal. And then it was just kind of, you know, when it first started off, it wasn't much, guys. I mean, we were like, you know,
no, it was pretty light early on. Yeah,
it was pretty light. And then, but that was understandable. It started off. Then it was, you know, oh, you can play anywhere. Then we went to cloud gaming, right? Then, oh, we don't need consoles. I mean, I'm not sure where any of this is going to land, but we're still talking about that stuff. And, you know, it's been years. So again, I just want the results. I don't care about everything else that goes into it. Show me the games. That's always been my thing. And then I'll be there. 100%.
I think
I agree with you. I agree with you, Dan. I think that is the way that the market for Game Pass has to be driven. I just wanted to comment on the fact that I'm definitely buying more indie games recently than I had to with just my Game Pass subscription in the recent past. And so I did notice that. I did notice that they were missing on some things that I thought were good. And maybe they aren't on Xbox, but to me, that's part of the Game Pass pipeline anyway, is to make sure that developers are making things that can run on a Game Pass system, whether that's PC or Xbox. So I do think that they have had a bigger bifurcation between finding all the gems than they have in the past. But you're right about Pal World. They deserve credit for that one and its massive success. And I'm sure they'll deserve credit for some things that come in the future. I'm just noticing that I am buying more indie games that aren't on the Game Pass than I had been for a little while.
Maybe it's because you're not looking and seeing that big kitty.
Little kitty. The kitty is little.
Sorry. I wish it was
kitty,
Big
small
Kitty, Little
city.
City, because that would be like a Godzilla kaiju game. But yeah, maybe you just need to check a little more frequently. Then you can avoid buying your kitty games and get them for free. You know.
Yeah, Fat Kitty, Small City would have been a better name. I'm just gonna put it out.
That's just a Chris Pratt Garfield movie.
Why does he have to voice everything?
Because
he's pretty good and he shows up on time.
Is that it? That's our requirement?
For good work ethic.
Yeah. Sometimes.
Damn it. So I think Abe has a fantastic comment. Shout out, Abe. One Bad Mother says this: small stuff is supposed to ride on the rising tide, not raise it. It's been backwards. Stranger Things leads people to find the niche stuff on Netflix.
Exactly.
That's true, but Stranger Things wasn't Call of Duty, right? If anything, like House of Cards was Call of Duty.
It is now.
Strange of Things was like a AA play that got to massive success. That's what Microsoft needs more of.
Yeah, and I think there was a comment somebody said, like, don't try to make Game Pass for everyone, and I kind of disagree, man. I think you have to make it for everyone, and then you get your casuals to find out about indies, you get the people who are subscribing to indies to play some of the bigger games, and I think it helps your entire ecosystem if you just have a wide variety of different types of games. But I think they're just missing the AAA. If they can get the AAA, I still think Game Pass is a great idea and can be a sustainable business model. I just think that there's a lot of indictments of like, oh, subscription services can't work. I think what you have here is currently a kind of just a bad example of this is like listening to, Smash Mouth and saying, oh, music is terrible. It's like, no, I think it's just that song.
Well, it's like listening to Smash Mouth and all of music turned into Smash Mouth at the same time, right? I think people are reacting to the fact the subscription model is failing some of the economic tests that the people that were making subscription content put forth, right? You've got Netflix, you've got Amazon Prime, you've got Disney Plus, you've got HBO Max, you've got Hulu, you've got all these various subscription services that are not getting to the bottom line that they thought they would be getting to when they projected out 5 years ago or what have you. So they're adding ads and they're doing these various things to change that business model. And it's unclear what, if anything, Xbox can do to change their business model in Game Pass. And what I've said from the beginning was it was always a mathematical play, right? There might be a golden path where they can make a little bit of money and they can pay developers enough money that the developers want to be on Game Pass. And there might not. That's just a reality of the situation. Is we didn't know whether the math would play out. We still don't know because it's a whole cycle that you have to go through in order to figure out whether that works. And so with Microsoft now looking essentially like they are nervous leaders, if we're going to give them any credit at all, it's understandable for people to say, I'm not sure Game Pass is sustainable because it doesn't sound like Microsoft is sure it's sustainable.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I just still believe that it's just a bad example of a service. Like, and you can point to the subscription services, but I would say each of the streaming platforms, you can point at it and I could tell you exactly what's wrong with it. I think most consumers could, right? It's like, well, it's a content problem, or well, it's the specific, you don't have enough of the stuff I want. It's like, we get it. And I think,
yeah, but the math might not work like at a reality level, right? The pluses and the minuses just might not equal. We don't have enough content because we can't spend enough money, because if we spend that much money, we have to charge X amount of dollars. And if we charge that much, our audience goes down. There might not be a golden path through subscriptions without ad support. Like, we don't know in passive media right now.
Yeah, sure. And I think that they will make those calls, but Xbox has like, Game Pass is a great idea. You have the right person making it, but is it on the right platform, right? Because Xbox has they're pretty much at the bottom when it comes to the
access is critical.
Yeah, access is critical. A lot of games don't come to their platform at all. That's kind of a bigger problem. If you don't even have games on your platform, then they can't be on Game Pass. And so there's just a lot of problems like around their business that have nothing to do with like the model working. I think it can work, and it'd be really hard to convince me otherwise. It's just like, I look at Game Pass and I know exactly why it's not working now, and I don't think it has to do with like the model, because the model already for like selling $60, $70 games, we know barely works, right? There has to be a better solution out there.
There has to be a better way.
Yeah.
There might be a better way, but this might be a worse way. What I'm saying is this was always going to be borne out in mathematics at some point.
I think it could be a worse way for Microsoft, but I think that has more to do with the Xbox's current position than it does the idea of a subscription service existing.
I think you said it earlier though, Travis. I mean, it's like, if I want to watch Shogun, right, on Hulu, I can't buy Shogun. I have to get Hulu, right? I can just go in and buy all these other games.
That's what I said. You have to go all in.
You have to go all in, and
There's a lot of services that sell their products on various marketplaces. I'm watching like HBO shows on Vudu because they sold their shows on that service.
I like Game Pass's answer better, because not because I think you're right, you'd probably get more subscriptions, but then if they only wanted that thing, then you'd get people unsubscribing. So you might lose money doing that. So I think the idea of you can buy it at a much higher price or just pay the subscription is actually better, both for the consumer, but also for the person making the content, because then your interests are aligned, right? You want to make great games because it sustains and adds subscribers, or it just sells copies outright. And so you're winning either way. And I think you lose some of that if it's like, oh, well, this one you can just buy and pick it out of the service, and there's no way to get it as a subscriber. It muddies the waters a little too much. I just think
but don't muddy the waters on Xbox. Then is fine, right? PlayStation can be your sales ghetto if you're Xbox. That's their ideal world. Here's a Call of Duty. You can pay us full freight, thank you, or you can come over to Xbox. I mean, like, that's okay for Microsoft.
I think that is the right model personally. And I think Netflix could do that too, right? If they sold you a movie for $50, which is a crazy price for a movie, I think maybe that's why it doesn't work there, right? But if you could buy like, a season of a show for $30, or you subscribe to Netflix, I think that could work. I just think games are a little different because they cost more. I don't think you could charge $70 for one movie, but you can do it for a video game.
I think there's more replayability too, obviously. With
totally.
Games,
Well, and there's, I think they got the model right. I just, their business.
The one aspect of this, I think, we've covered a lot of it, but I think the one aspect we haven't touched on too is kind of like in-game monetization, right? So that's another factor here that we don't really see in the subscriber number, is if you get someone playing a game because of Game Pass that they then spend money, and we've talked about this before with the show, Dan. Games like that, Call of Duty. I mean, Call of Duty monetization is bonkers, right? Yep. So you get more people playing that, whether or not they played in Game Pass or not. You get the subscription money, but then you get the in-game revenue because more people are playing it, right? And there's surely some other examples than Call of Duty in the show, but
you also get in the live service category of a Call of Duty, you also get sustained player counts. You get the health of the ecosystem of people having access to it, and there's so many benefits here. That's why we
know from history that wasn't enough to get Activision to the table to put their game in Call of Duty in Game Pass. So we know that's why Microsoft is part of the purchasing order of these things like Bethesda.
No, but it's additional revenue is my point. They own it now, so it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. But the math still has to work even for Xbox.
Of course.
If they're giving up more than they're getting, at some point a bean counter is going to say, what the hell are we doing, gentlemen?
Of course.
Yeah, but it's different because Activision doesn't care about how many subscribers Game Pass has unless they're part of Xbox, right? And so it's like, obviously, we're not going to take a lump sum or you can't afford us type of deal, right? You can't afford our game on Game Pass. But if you're part of the company and you're now getting the money that Game Pass subscribers give, it's way different calculation. So
yes, that's the idea. But we know that Activision itself couldn't be persuaded by monetization or DLC or whatever to put their games on Game Pass. So
because they're not getting the Game Pass money for 3 years.
But Xbox would have written a check to put that game on, and the check couldn't be big enough, right? Yeah. So Microsoft is essentially writing a check to Activision, even if they're in the same company. It's just a matter of whether or not that's okay with the bean counters, because otherwise they can get that money from the marketplace itself.
I think it has to be. I think you have to just put it on there and then say and expect this forever. Expect that we're going to have Call of Duty every year.
I'm just offering that this math is trickier than some people out there are suggesting. And
of course,
it may wind up.
You're right. I think you're right. I think
if it wasn't tricky, we wouldn't be having this conversation. It'd be
I would say you're right that the math is tricky, but your product is doomed if you don't do it. So either shit or get off the pot, right?
I said Call of Duty is going on Game Pass.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. But I'd say announce it forever and fully commit to this, and then if it doesn't work out, you can kill it later if the math doesn't work out. But I don't think you'll ever give the math a fair chance unless you do this shit.
Agree.
You gotta do
that's my point.
So,
yeah.
Well, I got to believe Phil is promise shy at this point, so I don't know that he'll promise it forever. I think Microsoft doesn't like promises right now.
I think Sea of Thieves is a good example here too, and I think Fifth String Max in the chat said it is, because here you have a game that's obviously been doing its waves on Xbox for a while. It's in Game Pass, but it just released on PlayStation. But it's it's just got put on PlayStation, right? It's one of their example games of experimentation, supposedly selling well over there. It was in the top 10 charts over there on the PlayStation side. So stuff like that's good to see, and that has in-game monetization too. So Let's get caught. We got a bunch of super chats. Let's get caught up on super chats, and then there's just this other angle I want to talk about to ask you guys. So Dan, let's crack through these.
All right. Pony up. Is that what I'm looking at here? All right.
Pony up.
Pony up. $5 super chat. They're already paring down studios they purchased merely years ago. If talents like Tango aren't safe, then what is Microsoft looking to keep?
I think certainly the companies that they bought individually are more protected than the companies they bought in package deals like Bethesda and Activision. So when people ask, well, what's going to happen to Double Fine or what's going to happen to Ninja Theory, I think those are companies that were selected specifically for combination with the culture of Microsoft. And that's a different ball of wax than buying a publisher with all the developers that
very
come
good
with.
point. It's a very good point.
I think you can. It's probably not super surprising that the studios that make games that I would describe as AA or at least AA in terms of their effect on the industry and how popular they are get cut. I think with big corporations, they put all their money into their big IPs, their sequels, the stuff that they think is pretty much a sure thing, and you shouldn't expect many smaller games or interesting ideas or innovation out of them, because that's not really where you go for that sort of thing. You go AAA. Somebody did a comment of AAA versus AAA, and I say, yeah, AAA is where you want to live in my opinion.
I think we've already covered this extensively, but just the word that jumps out to me in this question, Pony Up, is talent. And the sad fact is you're looking at the studio financially, not from the success of Hi-Fi Rush.
Also
critically of Hi-Fi Rush.
Also paring down is PARNG. It's a different word from the word pairing, PAIR. But yeah.
Nobody cares, right?
Neither here.
Well, there were two major studios, and then there were four, so that's two pairs.
So maybe he was making a pun. He was making a pun, paring down.
Ooh, pony up.
Pony up with the pun.
No, it's punny up. Punny up.
Punny up. And punny up again with $5. You got a lot of them in here.
Yeah.
Why is 343 allowed to fail multiple times, but Tango gets the boot?
Oh no!
Despite their success. Here we go. Ains is already. I can see him. He's going to fall off that chair. Is this an issue with the Game Pass model or with Phil Spender?
This is a very obvious difference. The difference is that Tango is a much smaller studio that doesn't have a tentpole game under their umbrella, and 343 does. You don't let your tentpoles fail. Even if you don't let them collapse completely, even if they stumble or fail along the way. And you can afford to do that with Tango because it's not it's not the most. Well,
343 was basically closed and reopened, right? Didn't they go through a full-on reorganization?
Yes, but they didn't say we're not going to make.
You got to keep a Halo studio open.
Watching Ains.
I know, because what are we talking about? So
I have no idea.
They did not come close to closing. They got rid of their.
They never would.
I meant in practice.
No, they got rid of their leadership layer that had been there for years, and apparently, from what we know from internal documentation, was pretty toxic, right? And they drove some of the bad decisions and critical errors that have been made along the way. They're gone, right? So yes, that happened. But to Travis's point, 343 is not going anywhere, right? Halo's not going anywhere. I think the main point I want to make here is the word success is in quotes, which luckily it is, because that is the problem. And I think we've addressed this already with people saying success. You say something like allowed to fail multiple times. They didn't fail. Doesn't matter whether you like Halo 5 or Halo Infinite or Halo 4, whatever. Those games were huge moneymakers, right? So as far as Microsoft is concerned, it made a ton of money.
Certainly failed the release date.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter how you look at that. We're talking about financials, and those games were financially successful. Tango, also, again, critically, it depends how you define success. It was successful critically. Was it successful financially? Doesn't seem so. So it's a very.
And I'd go with realpolitik here. If you have a favorite sports team, you know that the homegrown talent maybe gets a little bit more of a leash than the free agent that you bring in. And Tango was purchased as part of a package for Bethesda and other assets. And 343 was homegrown to make Halo games. So it's going to be a different kind of calculus as to who you get rid of and why. But yeah, I tend to agree a little bit more than Ains that 343 has had significant stumbles in its operation throughout its history.
They absolutely have. Yeah, no one's questioning that. But financially, they've still been extremely successful with the Halo.
But I don't view that as a GP or Phil Spencer issue. as much as it's just a different company doing a different thing that was not the aim of what Xbox was buying with its billions of dollars anyway.
Also, just keep in mind that we don't really know the full answer on if Hi-Fi Rush was a success financially, or we know it was critically, but let's say that it was. That still doesn't mean that your studio gets to stay open, because again, studios get closed on based what they're going to do in the future, not what on that they did in the past. You don't get to make money off of what they did in the past anymore. Once you sold the game, you sold it, right? And so you close studios based on what their next project is, and we don't know what their next project is, or if they had one, or if it was going to be successful. So these are people making these calls based on what they see in the future, not what they saw in the past. So your past successes essentially don't really matter.
Which is essentially what Schreier's article said in talking to the internal leadership.
I think that's right. That's how these decisions are made. But I do think somebody can look at it and say, but isn't that a suggestion that they could be successful in the future? Versus
I would say so, for
343, which misses an Xbox launch, releases a game that is not as popular as Halo should be from most regards. Even if Ains loves it, why are they still around? It's because they're homegrown. They were built up by Xbox themselves. And somebody needs to make Halo, so we might as well use the studio that's already in existence.
The other thing is that Tango Gameworks was a much bigger studio than the type of studio that would make a Hi-Fi Rush game. So even if it was successful for an indie studio, you have to think about how big that studio is. They're not really set up to be a game that makes, or a studio that makes small games. And so at the very least, if you loved Hi-Fi Rush, but you thought some of the other stuff they did, like Tokyo, was not... Ghostwire was not a good game for them. At the very least, you have to lay off like a whole bunch of their team and reform them as a team that makes these small games, right? And maybe there was just no appetite for that, or they had no other small game in the pipeline, or there's a lot of questions here.
And we don't really have a good handle on how many people are laid off as part of all this. We know the studio is closed. We see Roundhouse is combined with ZOS, but we know that Arcane Austin may wind up being an adjunct to Arcane Lyon or something else. Like,
that's why I said that at the start.
Exactly what all this is.
That's why I said at the start. This isn't even like, as far as numbers is concerned, this isn't even that big a news compared to what we've seen in the past several months, right?
It's a reaction to Xbox generally, and their
straw on the camelback type thing. Yeah, exactly what you said. Yep. Let's get through some more of these. Apollo Dingo, sweet. Hogue. Or Hog. We're calling you Hog from now on.
The Hog. Telling gamers to shut up on a podcast. Irony.
Boss.
Did you tell gamers to shut up? How dare you?
I think I told him to be less emotional, but that can be taken wrongly, especially by emotional people.
Wow. Doubling down on his
damn it, Hog.
This is why you've got to be aware of the lawyer class. People, they say that I'm the elite, the coastal elite. But look at this advanced degree, tweeting about how you shouldn't even be sad when people get laid off on the day it happens. He's just dancing on the graves of studios, and I don't know. I wouldn't trust him if I were you.
By the way. Sorry, go ahead.
Hog Law sounds awesome.
Hog Law.
Hog Law. And run with it.
Hog Law.
That's going to be a TV show.
Today we're talking about the ins and outs of the monster truck rallies. That's how...
Coming to True TV later this year.
Sunday. We'll sell you the whole seat, but you'll only need the edge.
By the way,
you like in your commercial riding a big old Harley, like, it's going. Yep.
By the way, I love how critical you've been of Xbox today, Hog, because there was someone who went off on you. I told you earlier this week on a podcast about how you are always just Xbox lover and never say anything bad about them. They use much more aggressive language, I will say. And I said, obviously, they've never listened to Hogue at all, because this is not true. It's quite funny.
I have a series of videos talking about how bad they are at messaging, but people pay attention to what they want to pay attention to.
Very true. Let's move. Let's keep moving.
He's the Ben Shapiro of gaming. We all decided that.
Pony up. Back again. $2 to that. The same passion brought you all to this cast, Hog.
Team Passion to this
Oh, he
cast.
changed your name.
Oh, well, the last one wasn't Pony Up. I don't know what this means. Am I missing it?
I think he's saying that people being passionate about the games is the reason we have this show, and he's arguing
That's true.
being passionate about games.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm not arguing against passion. I would like informed passion within reason, and for people to not emotionally bond to brands and corporations.
I've seen you emotionally bond to brands, by the way.
I'm sorry?
Maybe
I've seen you emotionally bond to brands. I've seen you get quite emotional about Star Wars and Final Fantasy and the directions they make. So
Spider-Man 2.
Maybe you should be a little bit more.
It's only because Spider-Man 2 story is so strong.
Yeah. I've seen you get emotional, Hogue. You're a very emotional guy.
I should have had brunch last a little bit longer.
He's like, I was having a beautiful dinner with my wife, and I came here for this shit.
Oh man,
love you, Hog. All right, moving on. Pony Up.
I hope the were worth it.
Thank you, Pony Up.
All right, BS. Unfortunate initials.
Fair.
I like it. Reasonable minds differ. Somebody said that
they
once.
They can indeed BS.
They can.
Yep.
And that's no BS. Thank you very much.
Unfortunate initials. That's very funny.
What's
that is good.
What's the BS stand for? You want to guess?
I think it's like her name, like Brittany Sampson or something. You know.
I'm gonna go with Brandy Smith.
Sure.
Yep.
Right. Sure. We'll guess. What do you think, Ames and Hogue? Why don't we all guess?
Any of those four names are correct.
I'm going Beth Samsonite.
That's wrong. Sorry, Hogue. What are you going with?
Let's see. I'm seeing Bethany Schwartz.
Oh, that's a really good one. Good guess.
May the Schwartz be with her.
I think Bethany as a name got retired in 1963. I don't think they threw that one. I think they threw that out with like Dottie and Dorothy.
You should tell my occupational therapist.
Yeah. Okay.
Who's 78?
Yeah. She's got to be like, yeah.
Oh my god!
You can do it, Hogue.
All right, moving on.
Like, you got it, Hogue.
You took these strays, Bethany.
You got Bethany in your corner. Take one more step today, old Hogue Lau.
Oh man! All right,
I'm trying to move on. Thank you.
Oh, then go back at it. More Hog. Explain doing well in the context of Game Pass.
Profitable and growing.
Yes.
You got.
I mean,
Hog,
obviously, I would assume they have internal metrics, right? Comparing what they would have made of a major tentpole release in sales versus the context of Game Pass and what they're making on that subscription. They have to, obviously, as Hogue already said, they have to calculate whether the revenue generation of Game Pass is going to outweigh the cost of developing the games they're putting in it. I mean, it's not even that challenging of a calculation once you have all the metrics. It's easy to calculate. I think they don't have all the metrics yet, which I think is the problem.
Well, from the accounting standpoint, they have to add in the opportunity cost of putting it on a marketplace separately as well.
Yes, they do.
My analysis would be to be a healthy and really anything, not just Game Pass, you either have to be growing or profitable, right? There's an obsession today with doing both, which is sometimes great. But I would say either Game Pass is gaming subscribers, it's getting closer to profitability, or it's profitable and it doesn't need to keep growing because they're making money. And as long as they sustain it, they're still making money. And so I think as long as you're doing one of those things, you can justify the experiment and investing more resources in it. But if you're not growing and you're not profitable, then you have trouble.
So one of those, and from 30,000 feet, like we get to see their financials as combined once a year, basically on this stuff. And we can see that Starfield and Redfall in that year that they had didn't move anything in Game Pass. Like it just stayed flat, right? They're getting more of that signal. They're getting more of that responsiveness immediately, and doing well in the context of Game Pass is going to mean you don't have as much churn. You're not losing as many people as you expect for this month, or you're gaining people ideally for Microsoft. That's doing well. Whether or not that's 0.5% or 5% is going to be up to them to figure out what they want out of these things and how much it costs to make the game. But they get to see a lot more than we do on the inside.
Yep, exactly. Apollo, thank you for the super chat. Pony Up's back again. Pony Up is back again.
Pony Up. Tie guy for I over AAA.
500% always.
Yep.
AAA will always be more
indie?
innovative. It'll always be more original. It'll always be more exciting.
High profile indie like Baldur's Gate 3.
Yes.
Okay.
100%.
I knew that would get out.
I mean, that is AAA.
Nothing says independent like licensing one of the most popular fantasy IPs in the world.
Right.
Hey, I've seen indie studios do that and fail miserably. And actually, in the Dungeons and Dragons example, there have been indie studios that have licensed.
Rocky City is brilliant, and I won't have you degrade it.
Well, I assume your stance is not that AAA by itself makes a game great, just that's where game greats can live.
I just think that if you're looking for the games that are going to lead the industry and surprise you in ways that you haven't seen before, AAA is where I would bet my money every time. AAA is for people who already know what they like or attached to an IP and just want more of that, but not necessarily innovation or anything. You rarely see that, especially in this later stage of games that we are. They play it safe. They have to. That's kind of part of their fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders, and independent studios have more freedom to take risks. So yeah, AAA.
Yeah. Shout out Hitman and IO Interactive. AAA babies.
Pony, thank you for the generosity today. Appreciate it.
Crazy Pony. Fifth String. Member comment: did the video game industry fully implode yet?
It's dead. Yes. This is actually our last show.
Yes,
this is our last show.
Yeah, not even close. It's actually growing despite the layoffs.
The console pillar
These guys
might not ever be the same again, right? Like people focus too closely on the consoles and the console war. That is not where the growth or core of gaming may wind up being pretty near in the future. But that doesn't mean that gaming overall is dead.
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of next couple bullets to touch on. Exactly that. You're right. WW, Fifth String, thank you. Debbie
W, member comment, Big Kitty Little City is an achievement in the game.
Nice.
I love this game. You can knock humans over and steal their bread. It's fantastic.
Oh,
Little Big City, folks.
Steal their bread. Why bread?
So you can feed the birds and collect the bird feathers.
Yeah. Have you ever played Untitled Goose Game?
I have.
Steal bread? Indeed.
I have played.
Why are there so many humans walking around the city with bread?
Well, and bagels and sandwiches. And things.
Well, as somebody who lives in a major city,
are they scooped?
No.
As somebody who lives in a major city, you can see me walking around with bread, like more than you'd think you would see that. I walk to the grocery store and I walk back with my bread.
If I were a kitty in your city, I would try to trip you.
That would be fine. And if you took my bread, I would say, look, this is the city. All right. It's dog eat dog. You got the W. Good on you, cat. And then I'd turn back around and I'd go back to the store to buy my own bread.
I'm gonna message D after the show and say I need a picture of Travis carrying bread, please. Thank you.
Dude, she could. I'd come back with all sorts of groceries.
You be careful. You're going to get an Against the Tide picture of Travis with bread, and it's going to be horrific.
I mean, here, Against the Tide already made me a goblin eating ice cream, which was horrifying. So I don't know if I could get worse than that. I'll take bread at this point.
All right. Sid.
Sid. Whoa, with 1,000 rupees? Rupees. Just would like to add Game Pass due to the nature of the service is easily exploitable. And I suspect the internal numbers are quite low for the attach rate. People often sub and resub depending on releases. The cash flow issue is understandable.
Yeah, and hold your thoughts for a second because he followed up with a continuation.
Another one. Oh, with 2,000 rupees. Also, the risk of Game Pass gamble grows bigger the more studios they have, because the more first-party games they release in Game Pass, the more short, medium-term damage will be done to their own a la carte market. It's kind of like
a la carte is a magic word.
Yeah, I like it too. It's kind of like a time bomb if it's a cache sink. That's fine.
It's possible. This is part of the trickiness.
Yeah, I think it's possible. I tend to disagree that is the case, though. What was the first one again? Can you see that?
Sorry.
Yep. I had
I just lost it. Yeah. Hold on. I got you. Well, why won't it? Hold on.
All good.
He did not got you.
I did not have you after it's at the
I can actually look. It's in his. Okay, there we go. Yeah. So easily exploitable 100%. I think that's only a problem if your pipeline isn't consistently fed. The great advantage that video games have that movies and shows don't have on streaming is that games take a really long time to play a lot of the time. And so you have to subscribe for more than 1 month. Whereas Netflix, you could just watch every show you care about in a month, and with probably not that much effort, really, even, and then you can unsubscribe. But people
I think I've
don't
talked
do
about
that.
it on this channel. I have a slot that's basically Netflix and Peacock and HBO Max, and then they just rotate in on like every 4 months because that's how long it takes for them to get enough stuff that I'm interested in.
Yeah, and so I think you can do that if you're making games, though. Like if Starfield had been a 10 out of 10 game, which I think most of us have agreed it didn't really reach that, especially at launch. If it had been a 10 out of 10 game, I think that could have sustained Game Pass for like 5-6 months, and it could have been growth that whole time. But I just don't think we've gotten there yet. But if they have a couple games that hit and they keep that pipeline sustained, I actually think games are safer than the other mediums we've seen exist, because you're never going to play all the games. And if you don't have enough time to play all the games in Game Pass and there's enough there that you care about, you're never going to be able to unsubscribe. So
I actually wonder if Fallout moved the Game Pass needle at all because of all the Fallouts in there. And if it did, whether or not Microsoft looks at investing in things outside of the game space entirely to move Game Pass subscriptions.
Would be cool. But yeah, I'm a little bit more bullish about this. I think this model has a ton of potential. I just don't know if Xbox is the right brand to deliver it because of their other problems in their business,
or if they even figured out how to deliver it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's entirely reasonable to look at this super chat and say, could they not be essentially conditioning their audience into not buying a la carte and halting some of the sales that they would otherwise get? And I do think that we've seen markets in video gaming even where that's happened, with the price of mobile games, for instance, just going through the floor as people set up there at the 99 cent and $0 level. So I think we have seen audiences get kind of conditioned into certain spending patterns. And one thing that does happen with Game Pass, and I talked about this on earlier episodes, is that I said that I have to buy more indie games now. There was a time where I would see an indie game come out and I wouldn't even purchase it because I figured it was coming to Game Pass within a couple weeks. And that may be good for Game Pass. That may be bad for those indies, but you can condition people's behavior based on what your product is and how it's operated. And I do think that is a long-term issue that's probably not the kind of thing that any given C-suite is equipped to deal with entirely.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it is if Xbox can condition them to only subscribe to Game Pass and they have the pipeline to keep them there forever, I think that's a success for them, and they should do that. And then it'll be up to other games to respond to that market. I mean, you saw it with streaming. It was just Netflix, and then everybody else had a subscription service. If Xbox succeeds, that is inevitable too. And then we get to a new game where we figure out, okay, well, can more than one subscription succeed, and how do they compete against each other? I get excited by that because I'm not the type of person who tends to get doom and gloom when stuff changes. For me, change is almost always good. I would rather things be different than how they are today, because at least it's interesting. And I don't have that problem. I don't have that same fear that some people have. But yeah, I'm interested.
Yeah, and you also like playing free-to-play live service games more than the average Joe. And I think that's part of the conversation.
I think I'm more
open. We're going to get there.
I think I'm more open to free-to-play live service games than the average person. But I would say my favorite games aren't free-to-play live service, certainly. So
yeah, I think to your one point, Travis, that's what we saw out of PlayStation, right? Because they updated their kind of subscription offering, and they kind of tried to walk the line, right, between their IP strength and their market versus individual sales. And I think they're kind of straddling that line of seeing how it goes and watching this Game Pass experiment unfold, to see what happens in the future. There's a couple other aspects of this we want to touch on, but I want to get through the super chats first. We'll come back. Sid, thank you for the generosity. Love to have you here. Thank you very much. I'm going to touch on the other point about this here in a minute.
All right. Apollo Dingo back again. The Dingo ate his baby for $1.99. What are the next studios Xbox closes?
The Dingo ate his studio.
We've already talked about it. Yep.
Arcane Leon.
Oh my God. Don't close all of Arcane, please. I'm begging you.
It'd be pretty brutal.
I did joke that if they announce they're closing Double Fine, my trip to LA is going to turn into John Wick 5. So I'm just putting everyone on notice.
I really, really doubt they would do that.
Don't touch Double Fine.
Double Fine, yeah. I just think they do their own thing, and you don't buy them. It's like, Hogue was talking about this earlier, but when you buy Bethesda, you don't think about what you're going to do with Tango necessarily, because they're such a small piece of it. But they bought Double Fine explicitly for Double Fine, and knowing what that studio is and what their history is. And so I think they're just in a different position expectation wise. And They make.
No, it'll be
games
some
that take a
support
while.
studio at Activision. It'll be like High Moon,
Probably.
something like that.
Ooh, High
You're
Moon would
probably
be
right
kind of
with this.
brutal. High Moon would be brutal. Yeah, it probably will be something in Activision because that's the next one. They're going to wait like 2 years and then they're going to figure out what pieces they don't need. And this is what I used to do.
That's what it happens.
Again, people think I am like this or I'm not empathetic. I don't want anybody to lose their jobs at High Moon. I just think that a support studio that was primarily functioning as helping make Call of Duties is the most likely to have content level redundancies with the Xbox platform.
I think what it
That's right.
is you are just more direct and blunt about the realities of the situation. That's all it is. And the realities don't change. I think you state them very matter of factly.
Yeah,
I've watched these things happen a lot.
Timing and knowing your audience.
Timing matters
and
too.
Maybe your phrasing being a little softer, but yeah, I have some marketing messaging notes for Hogue.
Thank you, Apollo,
Findle.
for the super chats.
Findle70 with the $5 super chat. Thank you very much. Another game releasing this year is an entire new flight sim.
True.
Oh, really? I had no idea.
Yeah, Flight Sim 2024.
Didn't we just get one of those?
Yeah, wouldn't we just get one?
No, Flight Sim came out like 4 or 5 years ago, but they
never soon enough. I need to get use out of my flight stick that I bought.
Yeah.
So
I also have one of those.
keep them coming.
I've heard enough about your flight stick, Travis.
Thanks,
Yeah.
buddy.
Man, flight
Pretty
sticks,
impressive stuff, isn't it?
big kitties. I don't know what the show is turning
Did you
into.
even finish the super chat? You got so
I know,
interrupted.
I'm
We
going.
didn't
I
finish the
think
super
those
chat.
sales and revenue they bring in through their store is very underrated.
Maybe.
We have no idea. So
We don't know.
The flight sims do appear to be successful both in the market and critically. So I have no doubt that will continue to be the case for Microsoft. I don't think it pushes Xboxes or even Game Passes. It's really more of a hobbyist kind of niche.
But those guys
PC
love
side of
it.
things.
So the person who reviewed Microsoft Flight Sim at IGN is a former Air Force pilot, and if you haven't seen that review, it's one of the best reviews I think we have because it's so niche and specific and like perfect for that type of player. Everybody should watch that review. Really cool.
I think my dad read the Falcon instruction book, which was in one of those like flight manual binders for like 5 years. He loved that so much.
What'd you say, Dan?
Like he went from the Air Force and flying like fighter jets to IGN.
Yep.
Man,
Damn
That's the
shame.
career path you're looking for.
And he found the like secret landing strip that he used to land on for his military service, and he landed on it, and it was there because of GPS, even though it's like not supposed to be like a surface. So to him, it was like very emotional. You should watch that review. It's really cool. Really cool.
I crashed into the airport near our house, Dan.
yeah.
Nice.
I was trying to land, just to be clear. I was trying to land, but I fully crashed.
Within each of us, there are two wolves.
You heard him, CIA. Take that clip.
I landed at Hy-Vee, so that's where
Nice.
I went to the grocery store.
You know
our
informational apparatus has to be watching data coming in from Flight Sim all over the place. So there you go.
Thank you for the super sticker. I don't know what it is because I don't have YouTube pulled up, but thank you.
I don't think there was one, if I'm honest with you.
I think I might have seen it.
Maybe
It might
it's
have been
just
like
the
some kind
phrase
of blue
super
thing.
sticker.
It's number one fan. That's it. Number one
Oh,
fan.
perfect. You're the best.
Thank you, Pagams and Pleasant. Appreciate you.
Love you.
Katie Cotton with the comment.
Katie Cotton. If their model is exclusive Game Pass for 1 month, ?
You could do early access on Game Pass.
I could see it.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Sure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That'd be
Why
interesting. Yeah, we'll see.
You gotta do something.
Simo is the name.
Hey, Simo. Well, I'm almost blank there. I'm trying to take, let me just put this out there. We had some clicking earlier today in the show. I have restless leg syndrome, so I had to take a muscle relaxer. It is kicking in at the moment. Coming in late, but I guess 3:12 a.m. SCs don't show super chats.
We did read them, Simo. I couldn't put it on the screen, but Tide, credit to Tide. She saw them, sent them over to me. I did read them out for you. So thank you for that.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Also, why are you thinking of us at 3:12 a.m.?
Yeah. Just waking up.
Why wouldn't you be?
Appreciate you. Apollo, another super chat.
Man, Apollo, you're going to be broke. Ninja Theories.
I think Apollo is at this point rooting for Xbox to close. There's a lot of a lot of negativity here.
I would say probably not Ninja Theory. Again, they were bought specifically rather than part of a larger acquisition, and I think that they are doing the thing that the Xbox thought that they would do with that acquisition, which is make longer tail AA prestige games that get them a bunch of critical acclaim.
Yeah, I think it is definitely a prestige play. I don't think it will separately move Game Pass subscriptions.
I don't
probably not.
But I also don't think they're going to be
the
close.
thing Xbox bought it to do. I think.
Yeah, which may be ill-advised.
Sure.
That's what we'll see. Yep. Thank you, everyone. Very generous today. It's been awesome. We actually broke over 400 concurrent at one point, so great to have so many people hanging out with us. I think, there was one thing. So, going back to Sid's comment about just Game Pass and kind of going fully in or all in there, I should say. I think it's going to be really interesting to see by this time next year, or I should say maybe their summer showcase of next year, right? If the experiment, because they'll have 8 months of data probably about that post Call of Duty launch, assuming, like we said, that Call of Duty goes into Game Pass, you have your other first party releases that you've been planning on for a while. You probably at that point have release dates for their other first party stuff like Clockwork Revolution from In Exile, South by Midnight from Compulsion Games, these other things that they've kind of been building towards for a while. And if you start to build that cadence in Game Pass, going back to Travis's point around kind of the content cadence and making sure you have those titles that draw in the consumers to the service, I think that's where it's going to get really interesting to see. The other thing that's left out of this conversation, the one point I wanted to make that people, which Hogue, you kind of touched on, is Game Pass ideologically is different from game sales because being a subscription service that is access, especially with the cloud backing you can use it with, is access points. So we've talked about the console market being stagnant, not the gaming industry, the console market. And so Xbox for a couple of years now has been pretty clear, I guess as clear as they can be with the rest of their messaging, that they are moving towards a broader future of just Xbox as an ecosystem and platform, right? I've written a lot about this. We've talked a lot about it. So when you think about game sales versus Game Pass and what that looks like, part of their calculation for Game Pass is getting people into that service that don't own an Xbox, right? And you can do that with Game Pass versus game sales. If you have game sales, you have to buy that game on a platform. With Game Pass, you don't have to have a platform. You're just subscribing to a service and can play games remotely, right?
Which also informs the name change, right? The stuff that you're hearing behind the scenes. Xbox is not a useful brand if you don't need a box, and Microsoft is a bigger brand around the world, period. So Microsoft gaming sounds stupid to us and sounds like the death knell for Xbox or what have you, but it's not really. It's just looking at things where you don't need a plastic box and trying to get those access points to make more sense in the branding world. I don't mean to suggest that that's the right play or that Microsoft is going to win on this score. I understand people that are emotional about missing a brand that they like Xbox, but it does make a lot of sense in the economic world of today.
Exactly what I was going to say. And I think it's clear for anyone who watches us regularly, we're talking about this from a kind of a logical point of view of understanding the industry and kind of how these businesses function and why the decisions are made from their point of view. It doesn't mean we're agreeing that it's necessarily either going to work or that it's what we would personally prefer, right? I think we should be clear about that.
I'm just getting ready for the comments I know I'm going to receive.
I do think you lose something if you lose the Xbox brand as Microsoft, because there's a lot of gamers, casual gamers, who do not know that Xbox is part of Microsoft at all, right? They like their Xbox and they might view Microsoft brand as stuffy and Minesweeper Solitaire adjacent or Microsoft Store for PC adjacent, which if you've played that, versus Steam, it's very, very.
But what about that rad space pinball game, Travis? I love that.
Right. One. Yeah, exactly. So I think that there is a certain player that, Xbox was a brand that launched with The Rock and was on MTV and did all this like cool stuff. Rappers talk about Xbox in songs. Microsoft gaming.
Are you going to name any cool stuff when you say that? No, just The Rock and rapping.
Yeah. Microsoft. Who's it? CeeLo Green. I guess she's Xbox and I'm more like Atari. Anyway, you guys remember that song? No?
I can't say that I do, Travis. I'm
Whatever.
sorry.
Anyway, so I do think you lose a certain gamer because Microsoft gaming doesn't sound that fun. And it I think if that's how you brand your platform and your games and all that, you do lose like a cool factor and you lose an audience. And I think you lose young people a lot who are, the vast majority gamers. I don't think there's a very good association with the brand Microsoft and video games, but there is with Xbox. They have like their own thing. So I think they benefit from a little bit of a separation, frankly, and maybe they could use that in some of their other products. You've seen it succeed with Azure. Azure is good. GitHub is good. Microsoft bad. So I think brands are helpful.
I think the sad fact is I think we can see what Hoag's referring to, right? Someone way up high saying, well, Microsoft's our brand and gaming's part of it. And if we're going to be an app on a Samsung TV, it makes more sense to say this is Microsoft gaming than Xbox. But
and that's why you need a young person in the room going, that's a bad idea.
We might need them younger than you then, Travis, because I think that you're still in the console mindset. And I don't know that the people behind you are.
I think they care a lot about brands, and I think that I think the way they've used Microsoft, say what you will, maybe the console brand doesn't matter, but I think the name Microsoft with people younger than me still means the same thing it means to people my age, which is like not a cool brand, not a brand that you trust around gaming, etc.
I agree they're not a cool brand. I agree that they are not trustworthy around gaming, but I think that you have to separate from the need for the console in the branding. I actually thought this when they started this with Game Pass, that it was interesting that they were framing it as Xbox Game Pass, because that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Doesn't.
And I'm not saying Microsoft Gaming is the right answer. They could call it, Pluto TV or whatever the equivalent is. You don't need words that make sense here.
Agreed. I would say that they should do that.
They call it Mixer.
But yeah, right. But then you have to start over again, right? You lose all of your credibility that you built up. People don't know that it's the same thing, and so you lose a little bit of the trust. And there's definitely an advantage to having the name PlayStation be a thing that's been around for 20 plus years, right? Versus a brand that you just introduced, because as we see with new brands like the Google ill-advised trip into gaming, that sometimes it's hard to get into this industry and people aren't going to know it's the same. I feel like it's a kind of a risk, and I get what you're saying that there is no box anymore. So maybe it doesn't make sense, but is that worth rebranding? If PlayStation goes into the cloud space, they're not going to get rid of the PlayStation brand. It's too valuable, even though it's no longer a station,
But the PlayStation brand is far more valuable as a brand than Xbox globally.
Well, 100%. It's without question. I think
I agree with
bad
you.
idea. I think new brand just for the sake of getting rid of the word box also might be a bad idea. I think you need a better reason to do it. The brand isn't resonating. We're being seen as the old guys now. We need to reboot Activision Gaming or Call of Duty, the company. I don't know what you want to do, but
this is why Nintendo was smarter, right? It was always the Nintendo Switch. It's always the Nintendo Entertainment System. They were always smarter about this, and they were prepared to move Nintendo around as the name.
But they also do gaming specifically. It's not like Sony, right? Sony doesn't use the word Sony in their stuff.
Sony PlayStation is the Sony PlayStation.
Yeah, but people don't call it. Yeah.
People don't
PlayStation
call it
is a dumb name.
PlayStation.
Xbox is a dumb name. PlayStation
and Xbox are both dumb names, but nothing beats the Wii U for dumb names.
Wii U is the dumbest name.
That is the dumbest name. I like Game Boy. I don't know why, but that one just rolls right off the tongue. I like Game Boy. I don't know.
What about Ouya? I mean, that was pretty,
Ouya, yeah.
You get into the modern Silicon Valley names, and they've started to run out of letters for trademark reasons, and they just get really stupid.
I will not defend the naming conventions of companies. I've worked for way too many dumb named companies in San Francisco, so yeah, you're not going to get any argument from me. But I think we can all agree that no console is ever going to beat the branding of the Soulja Boy console. I mean, that was
fair. Yeah,
pinnacle.
Nintendo Switch is just such perfect branding.
It is.
It says exactly what it is. It gives you a kind of notion of its toy features. Xbox, by comparison, I never liked. X always tried to be too edgy from the start.
It was DirectX. It actually made sense.
Yeah, Direct Xbox. That's what it was.
There was a reason it was called Xbox, right? Yeah. DirectX, and
also that X was going to give it to you.
Gaming.
And it was the internal name for the box that they intended to replace. They're like, it's a box that plays off DirectX, and then they just ended up going with that name. So I don't think it's the same as
you do hate that.
What?
How you get triangle strategy, folks?
Yeah. Yes. I don't think it's the same as like Twitter being X because Elon Musk likes X or some stupid reason like that. I think it's a more organic is my point. So I can put up with it more. It's still stupid though.
I really don't have strong feelings on any of these names. I just think they're all silly and they're just in our heads because they've been around so long.
Yeah, that's fair. So I think, we obviously will be continuing to kind of look at this as the year goes on and we learn about exactly what's going to happen later this year. We'll talk more about it. I think the aspects, just to kind of put this on a closing note, that are really interesting as you pay attention to this stuff. And I put a few bullets here, right? As I dive into the data around this stuff and the gaming industry and what's driving decisions and stuff, right? There's a couple key points that, Hogue, you lightly touched on there around the generation post-Travis, right? Is that generally speaking, the data around Generation Alpha, so now we're the younger kids past Z, right? So you got Gen Z and now Gen Alpha, doesn't engage with gaming the way we think of gaming at all. I mean, not even remotely in the same way. They don't have an allegiance to consoles at all. They are very mobile focused. They are very free to play focused, and they are very cost conscious. Spending $60 or $70 on a single game does not compute to them. It is not. It's not a thing that goes through their head. It's what game can I go play for $5 or for free? And they are much more likely to spend continual money in the vein of $5 to $10 maximum over time than they are to buy a game outright at $50, $60, $70. So
that's
I think
some conditioning.
Exactly. So some of this early data that's coming out again goes back to the people who are like, well, sales matter and you just sell the big game. And there's a lot of other factors, especially for the upcoming generation, that the higher levels are looking at that impact these decisions.
It's the other one is period. It is.
I think the younger people are going to be way more open to a subscriction service than buying.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. The console market isn't growing. We've touched on that. And then lastly, which Matt Piscatella put some good data around this for everyone, is that quite frankly, and we've talked about this here a lot, is that there's a handful of live service titles, the biggest ones, the ones we're talking about, the Fortnites, the Call of Duties, etc., that are really sucking the air out of the room. You're at a point now where you. And then there's Skull and Bones and Suicide Squad, but
the obligatory contractual mention of Skull and Bones from renowned influencer / ambassador of Skull and Bones, Richard Hogue. Put on your pirate hat and please do a 1-minute advert. Let's go.
I have played so much Skull and Bones this week. I finally got that darn ghost ship. It's been a heck of a week. Somebody stole 2,000 pieces of 8 from me, made me sad. Ooh. But then they helped me blow up that ghost ship, made me happy. Skull and Bones.
But yeah, I mean, the matter of fact is that more and more players are engaging with a handful of titles continuously rather than, investing in new experiences. So there's some really interesting data points of the recent probably 18 to 24 months that are really informing some of these decisions and will continue to, I think, into the future, right? So, it's just, I don't know. I find this stuff fascinating, but then I'm a weirdo. So what do you want?
We're all weirdos.
On that, we all agree that Ames is a weirdo. Finally, the unifying issue.
Hey, we got it. As long as we can come together,
We're all weirdos in our own way.
So any capping points? I think we've covered that pretty well, top to bottom today. Anything capping you want to say before we just one quick quip?
I do. I have something serious, actually, I would like to discuss for a moment. So if you could play the More You Know music behind me, that would be great. I want to talk about a little game I mentioned last week. It's not really there, Ains. I was joking. The More You Know is from NBC.
How about...
I mentioned a game last week called Endless Ocean Luminous. And this is a game in which you're a diver and you go and you scan little fishies out in the water. And that's it. That's the whole game. You continue to do that until you gain levels and maybe can recolor your scuba gear. You don't have to manage your resources. You don't get a boat. You don't have a submarine. You don't have an oxygen level. You're just going and you're scanning little fishes. Or in my case yesterday, a seal that likes to wear crowns and jewelry. But I want to say this for those of you that follow my channel or even me on this show, you probably know that I've been dealing with some post-stroke psychology. I've been having a post-stroke anxiety and worrying about various things in my life and around. And for whatever reason, playing this game, and I'm going to use that term lightly, is so calming and meditative. I've played it like one of the early morning hours now for the last few days in a row, and it puts me in a good state of mind for the rest of the day. So I don't know if that's value as a video game or not, but it is value as a product. And so I want to say thank you to the folks at Nintendo that made Endless Ocean. I don't know why it works the way it does, but it has worked supremely well for me. And I wanted to mention that to folks because I think it's a fantastic thing that it has happened.
That's awesome. Very cool. Good shout out.
Counterpoint 4 out of 10 IGN. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what they
there was a Eurogamer review of this. There was a Eurogamer review of this. It said something along the lines of, I think this game is terrible and I kind of love it, as the headline. And I think that's about right. Like, there's nothing ostensibly great about this game, but it is calming. The music is wonderful. You get to hear like the oxygen and the scuba gear. And it just is really calming and fantastic. So I can't disagree with 4 out of 10. I can't disagree with I really hate it. But I don't know if I could recommend a game more this year right now.
I don't think we actually reviewed it, for the record. I'm sure it's a fun game. Yeah.
Nice. That's cool, Hogue. On that note, I was going to say, we nothing really to cover on it, but kind of quietly hilarious that Nintendo President Furukawa comes out on a tweet and just says, "Oh, by the way, we're going to have a direct next month, and the Switch 2, we'll talk about that soon too."
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
We all knew it. It was the worst kept secret in the industry, and
Yeah.
I'm glad that he finally just said it's happening, because it's like, yeah, we know. We know.
Someone posts on Twitter, they said, "Why does every major Nintendo tweet sound like it's a hostage situation?" This is President of Nintendo Furukawa. We are holding the Switch 2.
Yeah. Why did he announce the Switch 2 while holding up today's newspaper? I thought that was a weird choice.
But apparently they're going to have a Direct next month too. So we not only have all the summer showcases we talked about last week, but a Nintendo Direct too. So
yeah, we'll get that second half Nintendo info, which right now only consists of that World Championship speedrun game. So we'll see.
Yeah, they said yes, the game's coming later in 2024 to the Switch. And supposedly, I think they said talking about the new Switch prior to the first quarter of next year, right? So, and there was a follow-up, basically. Someone, I think, inquired about what we can expect. If I don't have the quote in front of me, but something to the effect that this is going to be very similar to the next generation Switch. It was basically a confirmation of what we expected, which is they're not going to change too much. It's more going to be like a generational leap than a full-on kind of change.
Yeah, there's specs that have been leaked that suggest that it'll be somewhere like an Xbox Series S. We'll see what happens. But I'm looking forward to the Switch too, because I love the Switch. And if it is backward compatible and gives things a boost, that would be a perfect product for me.
Agree. A couple of super chats to close out with here.
Sid back with another one. Not being heartless, by the way. Just have the misfortune of understanding corpo speak.
It's like being Cassandra sometimes, Sid.
Hard disagree. You are one of the enemies from Kingdom Hearts.
Don't let Travis get to you. He just hates truth tellers.
That's true.
Hates truth
and
tellers.
lie tellers.
Really, just tellers. Really, just tellers.
Look, we're all just brains piloting bone mechas when it comes down to it, and you can hate them all.
Don't be misanthropic like Travis.
My bone mecha, man, is falling apart.
It really is.
Old sucks.
I haven't seen my bone mecha for like 5 years. So
that's a good thing. You're not supposed to see your bones, Dan. Did you forget that that's a part of it?
We're referring to. So all right, I got you. Yeah, sounds awesome.
Sid, thank you today, Sid. Appreciate you, Carl
with 499 super chat. Great discussions today. Definitely one of my favorites. Thanks for the great content.
Thanks for helping support, Carl.
Yeah. Thank you, Carl. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Can I give
follow? What? No. Go ahead.
I was going to give a shout out to the person who sent me the threatening messages all week and then got his account banned at the end of the week. And I was just,
I know.
Wherever you are, missed connections. I miss you, buddy. Sorry that happened. Yeah.
It was just me. I'm creating a new account.
It was just
I'll
you.
get around.
Your sock puppet account. Yeah, that was good.
You don't understand. Travis gains life force from people that hate him on the internet.
I really do. I really do. I
Stop
say
hating him.
when I do comedy shows and people boo, I'm like, dude, your boos only make me stronger. Like, you don't get it.
Yeah, we actually just all rotate Travis. With the
really?
It's
You know what? We're in a rotation. My siblings used to do that with writing letters to me as my mother, right? When I was a kid, it's your handwriting.
I never wanted you.
Squirts a little perfume on it to make it authentic.
Dear mistake.
What are you talking about?
Every time Travis gives a story about his past, it sounds like Oliver Twist.
Oh my God.
I don't know. I made that up. That's Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.
That's right.
Apollo
Dingo with the $4.99 super chat. That what I wanted. I can't even talk anymore. That I wanted Xbox to win. I'm disappointed. I was rooting for them. I'm a PC player exclusively. I feel like I was tricked by their communication.
Yeah, it's fair.
I felt like that for forever, but not just by Xbox. Trust me, it's everybody. They all trick me. I have a very weak mind. I listen to people and these companies, and
no, you don't.
Usually lie.
No, you don't.
Yeah, I do. No, I don't. Listen, we need to all just step back sometimes and just kind of go, hey, look at this awesome hobby we have. Who gives a crap about all this other junk? Because that's really what matters. And it gets harder and harder for me every year. Just care about. It's interesting stuff. I like it's very, very interesting things, but it just gets harder.
Interesting, but I think it's better for everyone's mental health if you just focus on the games that are coming out and buy the ones that you like and support them, and the ones that you don't like
Skull and
don't
Bones.
buy them. Skull and Bones. If you like Skull and Bones, talk about it every week.
Right.
Do your 1 minute paid ad every week on Bitcast.
For the record, FTC, I am not paid to promote Skull and Bones. I just like it that much.
For the record, FTC, he is also paid to lie about how much he is paid to advertise Skull and Bones. Yeah. But anyway,
no, I think you're right. I think I said the same thing on Cast. I said, if anything, this week is demonstrative of the fact that people are too invested, to Hoag's very early point here, and that if you just focus on the games releasing, as you just said, Travis, focus on the games you like. There's plenty of them. There's tons of games out there to play.
It was an
Find the ones you like,
games.
Yeah, and enjoy them. And sometimes you'll be a lot better off.
Yeah, it's certainly not your job to wonder if Game Pass is sustainable or a good model for Microsoft. It's your job to buy it if you like the service and if you feel it's beneficial to you as a consumer, and everything else does not matter if they go to business later. Obviously, you take that into your calculus when you invest in ecosystems, but ultimately doesn't affect you.
Well, speaking of investments, I've actually taken to playing Skull and Bones that way, trying to memorize.
What in the hell, man?
Trying to memorize the look of the sunset, the storm off in the distance, because I'm worried they're going to take it away from me, Travis.
What is happening?
Look,
speaking of,
sorry, the crowd. We heard the crowd on that one.
He has the unfortunate situation of becoming really attached to a game that probably is going to get, thrown into the bin of video game history. And it sucks because I also think that game is pretty good.
Anthem.
And it sucks when you like a game and you just know it's not going to last. Like, there's no worse feeling. Yeah.
It's weird in gaming, right? You don't have the same thing with a movie that you like or anything. It's like, this is going to go away and I'm not going to be able to sail between these islands at some point. So I'm going to remember what it looks like. Like, I'm on death's door for a video game. It's bizarre.
Yeah. Let me see your face one more time so that I can remember its imperfections.
Oh, man. Good stuff.
Join me in Skull and Bones is the point, everybody.
Yeah. Hoag is playing Skull and Bones like a person whose sight is slowly failing is trying to remember a loved one's face. Yeah.
Oh boy. All right. Well, we'll close out this episode on Skull and Bones for some odd reason, but here we go. On the season game inside the house, just a couple of reviews to check out. So Alex finished up his review of Stellar Blade. He was delayed for a little while, but you can see his thoughts up there. I've got Top Spin coming probably tomorrow, actually. Final on that.
I keep forgetting about Top Spin. Darn it.
My review should be up tomorrow, Tuesday at the latest. We're doing a video as well, Hoag, so just stay tuned. You can get kind of my full write-up on it. I did cover all the Xbox stuff this week, not only the details of what happened, but some stuff about Sarah Bond's interview as well. You can check those articles out. And then if you want to listen to more about this, Joe, Luke, and I did cast co-op this week. We had a long conversation. We touched on a few different other points than what we touched on today. So it's still a very good conversation. I really enjoyed it with those guys. So you can check that out. Hogue, I'll pass to you first this week. What you got?
Sure. Well, I did call out Endless Ocean, so I do recommend people check it out. Whether or not it's a video game, your mileage may vary. But I wanted to mention that I did do 2 videos on my channel this week. I did one about the FTC's attempt to ban non-competition provisions and whether or not that will ultimately prove successful. And I did a video on discussions regarding the Warner Brothers $200 million categorized loss for the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League game, and whether or not that's fair reporting and various other aspects of that. So both those videos I think are really good. Come check them out on the channel when you're not playing Skull and Bones.
So check them out anytime, really. Anytime you can make it over. Travis, what you got?
Yeah, you can look at my review of Fallout 76 if you're interested about how that game is developed. And I've got Disney Dreamlight Valley coming soon. I've got a really cool game I'm going to do the gameplay reveal on in 3 days. First time we're seeing gameplay. It's a game I think Hogue is going to be interested in, so I'm excited to talk about it next week.
What I like to hear.
And until then, I will go back to not existing. I only exist in a liminal space during the hours of the show, and when the show's not recording, I no longer exist. So I will go back to that.
We weren't supposed to tell people you were an AI. YouTube gets mad at that.
Sorry, man.
Yeah, I have to actually tell them it's not AI based now. You got
the AI is going rogue and awakening. So
Dan, I think it's your turn to create the account to hate harass Travis this week. Can you take that?
I got it.
You could do that.
Okay, yep. Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Chat, everyone hanging out with us today. Thank you very much. Very generous today. A lot of great conversation. Appreciate you hanging out with us. Hit that like, hit the sub. You know the routine. It helps us out. Other than that,
another win for the Make Bitcast 3 Hours crew.
Yeah, another win for them. They've been doing well lately. Everyone, I hope you have a great week. Enjoy your games. That's the crux of the conversation. Enjoy your gaming this week. And we will see you next week. Audio listeners, thank you. As always, we will talk to you next week as well. Until then.
McClunky.